Afrika Mashariki, tuwezeshe kuishi kwa amani, tutimize na malengo yetu. Jumuiya yetu sote tuilinde, tuajibike, tuimarike. Umoja wetu ni nguzo yetu, idumu jumuiya yetu.
Please do take your seats, ladies and gentlemen. Our viewers joining us on UBC and NBS, and our participants via Zoom, and our invited guests here in this room. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me in a very, very special way to recognize the presence of some of our very distinguished guests, but start with our co-conveners. So allow me to recognize the presence of the UNDP country representative, Ms. Elsie Atafa. And for those of you who were here yesterday, we saw the passion from her communication yesterday. And somebody told us that, can you give us more Elsie today? We will try and see how much more Elsie we can give you today. With us is the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Cooperatives, Ms. Geraldine Sali. And allow me also in another very special way, recognize our dear friend. She was among the people that bathed the AFCTA. She was part of the protocol discussions, the agreements, and a dear friend of all of us, the Honorable Amelia Chambade, the former Minister of Trade. Other people in my space used to call her Mama Bubu. Yeah, she bathed by Uganda, build Uganda. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, I've seen our commissioner here and several leaders from the ministry. I also see stakeholders. The Vice President of the Uganda National Chamber of Commerce is here. We have other stakeholders, the banking sector, our friends from the Export Promotions Board, the Private Sector Foundation, the logistics team that were here yesterday, the Uganda Women's Entrepreneurs Association, and many more. We want to thank you all for joining us for this day 3, a conversation on unlocking Uganda's potential in the CFTA. Honorable Melia, when you hear us call it CFTA, it's because we've tried to shorten it, but everyone knows we're talking about the African Continental Free Trade Area. Since the conversation continues, those who've been with us probably understand what we mean. On day 1, we did look at, and the conversation specifically on day 1 was understanding the African Continental Free Trade Area. It moved into day 2, where we were looking at positioning Uganda to benefit from the Continental Free Trade Area. And quite an enriching panel discussion yesterday that spoke to several issues that the panelists believed we needed to position ourselves as a country in addressing some of the barriers we have, the conversations on some of our bilateral agreements, our quality and standards as a country of the products that we are pushing into the market, the export promotion strategy we are building and developing as a country, our preparation and our preparedness when we open up to the rest of the continent. We also, of course, were being there were sharings and testimonies of what's happening in our space, the issues of land fragmentation, the issues of trade finance, and of course, as a country doing much better to improve on our ease of doing business. So there is a lot you could pick from yesterday, and I really would like to encourage anyone who's joining us and is wondering where we are at in this conversation. I would really encourage you to join the platform, the UNDP platforms online, the YouTube platforms of NBS and UBC, where you can watch day 1 and day 2 in full, and follow us on social media using the 2 hashtags we are pushing for this conversation. So day 3, we'll be looking at enabling the private sector to benefit from the Continental Free Trade Area. And we have a rich panel again today that will be helping us understand the role of the private sector in this conversation. So may I welcome the Permanent Secretary to come and make welcome remarks. And then I will invite Mr. Richard Mubiru from the Uganda Manufacturers Association to take us through his keynote presentation. A round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for our Permanent Secretary.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Most of our CEOs and business leaders here today, our resident representative of the UNDP, our former Minister of Trade, Industries and Cooperatives, all protocols observed. Thank you very much for coming. Ladies and gentlemen, I've safely removed my mask, so we have someone who's going to spray this microphone immediately after I finish talking, just in case I infect anybody. But I prefer to remove my mask, and you will excuse me for that, just so that I can address you comfortably. The first thing is that I would like to thank you so much for committing this time into such a heavy exercise that would require us to see how Africa is going to open its boundaries to trade and work together in terms of growing our economies, tapping into our synergies and making sure that our economies are benefiting from such an arrangement that has been fostered from here within in Africa. When I came in on Thursday and we opened this summit, we wished everybody a good deliberation and good technical deliberations for that day to input into the process. Now, for me, it was like I am being schooled into trade and all the nice things that go into it. But I picked up a few things in those deliberations, and specifically, the one I would like to mention was the one from the CEO of the CFTA, who was online that day, and his name, he goes by the name of Wamkene Mene. He talked about currencies. Currencies, this is a very big issue because, as you know, we are 54 countries who are signed up to this CFTA. And we also have different regional rates and purchasing power parities for our currencies. And we even have a currency that belongs to the United States of America being traded across Africa. We might meet a few challenges here and there, but the willingness to amalgamate such a holistic view for me was a winner. The fact that someone is thinking about this kind of detail in terms of language, the languages we are going to use to interact together, the translation first to log on and see if the app is already in there or in production, but it's not yet in there. But what really impressed me is that there are people actually working in the background to make this happen. So we look forward to this. The most important thing is that we need to educate our people to know that these things exist. Because even right now as we speak, just on our boundaries between Uganda and Congo, or Uganda and Kenya, our traders are actually suffering with just moving goods among us. So I think once we learn to refine them at the East African level, then we can do better at the African level. So maybe we can use ourselves as a prototype to make things better. But I just quickly wanted to highlight some of the things that we can capture as we're having these final discussions of day 3. That the CFTA presents Uganda a great opportunity to industrialize and increase agricultural production, as well as agro-based manufacturing. So all the players must work together to harness this very potential. We are agriculturalists, that is our biggest competence, and we must capitalize on it to grow. So we need to also de-risk. De-risking those markets in agriculture, we most of the time rely on God and faith. Someone goes out there to plant their maize. If the rain season doesn't come, that's it. The insurance is not yet embedded in the systems of agribusiness. We have not yet got export guarantee schemes across the country. It's just a few people who are trying to actually design these things. And we really need, at this point, at this juncture, and I'm very glad that Housing Finance Bank is in the house, that we need to get the financial sector on board now to actually help us design these products that are going to support agribusiness and support products like export guarantee schemes and so many other products, and start thinking alongside us as part of this conversation. We need to make companies export ready. Export ready meaning that we need to adhere to the standards acceptable across borders, because without standards we shall not be able to actually exchange. We need to actually talk about infrastructure. We talked about it. Uganda is doing some roads, as you know, to Congo, but that's not enough. We can actually deliberately take a map out on an infrastructure map to see how we can make these things better, especially the pain points where we think we can get more out of each other from the cross-border exports and imports. The warehousing facilities, as you all know, actually Uganda has some warehousing facilities in Kenya. We own some of them there, but they're underutilized, and they're utilized by other countries, less by Uganda. In fact, it's like almost about less than 5% of our products go into the warehouses in Mombasa, which are actually owned by Ugandans. So we really need to work harder at some of these facilities, you know, the standards, the roads, the land ports and the airports, to actually make things better for us. And of course, the country must increase the capacity. As I gave you my example of the ducks. We want to increase commercialized agribusiness so that we are able to satisfy the markets and the demand in those markets. First of all, it's like we cannot satisfy our own demand in Uganda, so how are we going to satisfy demand across our borders? We need to create that capacity and increase the potentials on commercialized farming and agriculture. So we also need to, and by the way, I'm so glad that we have Bubu, and the Queen of Bubu is right here. I would like to recognize the fact that buy Uganda, build Uganda, proudly Ugandan. You've actually challenged me, both my sisters sitting on that table, because they are wearing African. I think I'm going to get up my game on African. So thank you so much. But my office desk is an African desk, Bubu. It was made in Uganda. Yes. And then, so the private sector also need to be ready. You see, the small scale industries are so small, and they do not have access to they don't have access to financial services, because most of the time they don't qualify. They don't have collateral. They don't have most of these things. They don't have access to training. They don't have access to facilities like, say, for example, the parts that we buy, like the industry equipment. People are buying from China. People are buying from Netherlands. People are buying from America, New Zealand, Brazil. But some of these people don't even have the funding. They don't even know where to start. So if we do the financial literacy for them, they could actually access some of these facilities that could help them become bigger and commercialized. And on that note, actually, Marks and Spencer was a small market store before they became big and international. So they were also an SME. And then in Peckham, those of you who know West London. So that should encourage others. The public and private sector should work hard together with government, to coordinate government entities. I told you of the story of the lady who was bringing in fish, and she went around 5 government agencies for 2 weeks just trying to get her fish across the border. That kind of inefficiency is not going to support the framework we are dreaming of, the framework that we want to enact. So therefore, we have a joint responsibility as government to make sure that we ease business and reduce the cost of doing business to our stakeholders. It's very important. And we must attach indicators to show that performance and reflect it and report back on a regular basis, say quarterly, so that our stakeholders know that we are doing something and we're just not sitting on their, on their papers. So once we harness this, this initiative, goods and services should be able to move. And I'm really looking forward to this afternoon's deliberations that are going to close. And we pick up the highlights that are going to help us foster this initiative into the next steps and the next stage. We have a commitment as a ministry to make sure that we move on. And I'm hoping that 2022, we'll come back and report some milestones where we have moved. And we continue to ask for your support, guidance, input, and as we actually deliver on this initiative. So without any further ado, I would like to close my remarks here and give it back to the MC. And I'm wishing us a very good deliberations for the rest of the afternoon. Thank you so much for listening, ladies and gentlemen.
All right, so that officially opens our discussions today, and we are now going to quickly dig into the content. This should be quite exciting because the conversations we've been having, and I don't know if you have our futures report before you. It's among the documents that we presented for you. We are asking CFTA to work, to work for us, but also we are keen on having the women and young people drive this conversation, and there are opportunities therein that should benefit the largest percentage of our population, which is represented in that report. Please do look at it. It has some great content and some of the sharings by the other partners in walking this journey with us. So may I now turn to our keynote presentation on enabling the private sector to benefit from the CFTA. I'll invite a board member of the Uganda Manufacturers Association, Mr. Richard Mubiru, to come and make his presentation. I'll be keen on time, Richard, so you'll notice I'm getting closer to you when your time is done.
No issues. Sorry. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. It always gives me great pleasure to indulge in conversations of this nature, or may I borrow what my sister did, so that I'm very audible. Gives me great pleasure to indulge in this form of discussions, because where we sit at the Uganda Manufacturers Association, the continental market is a serious market, and I'd want to share context, and of course to set the stage for government to doing something. One is to say that this is not the first time Uganda is getting market access. We have had a lot of markets across the globe. You name AGOA, Albert Arms in the EU, name it. Markets have been around. What is it that we have not seized the opportunities that have been coming around? And we think that actually, this time around, this is our opportunity. That's number one. Number two is to say that looking at what is coming from the continent is very exciting. And the reasons are simple. We already have a demographic dividend on the continent where almost 70% of our population is young, and which speaks to innovation and agility to the extent that we are able to mold them into being productive. That said, there's something very exciting, and this is the fact that 52% of actually what we export is agriculture, and agriculture is the dominant part of our economy. But then this challenges us to the extent that we need to do different agriculture, maybe focus on value addition. And I'm glad that this is coming at a time when we have NDP3 that has already mainstreamed industrialization as the way to go. But then the key thing would be in really the building blocks that realizes that trajectory. Talk about numbers. Yes, our numbers are still very weak because the numbers I have for 2020 is 4.3 billion that we could collect from exports. 52% of that is agriculture. And for us, in the private sector where we sit, we are looking to a day when we project doubling this number. And I'm looking at a number of $10 billion. Why not? because we have been struggling with small numbers time and again, and our country is weak because we are having to post small numbers. So I'm here really to challenge whoever is present to look at big numbers. And in the big numbers I'm speaking to can only be from the agricultural value chains that we have. But you need to listen to this. And I saw it firsthand on Sunday. The ravaging weather pattern that is coming. Those of you who live around Mukono, etc., you could have seen it on Sunday. And for me, it presents a strategic challenge which we need to address even before we look at anything more. Because 52% of what we export is agriculture. And the nature of agriculture is such that we depend on rain-fed agriculture. Now, if we don't address what other big boys were debating in London, we are actually sitting on a time bomb. So that is to say that as we look at opportunities going into Africa, we need to look at sustainability first and foremost. Because the way our exports are structured are agro. Now, our agriculture is 90% dependent on rain-fed agriculture. If the rains fail, we are done. I wanted to see new conversations, especially with the Operation Wealth Creation, focusing at tree planting before we go any further. Because we cannot run away from nature. Nature is here and is actually paying us heavily because we disturbed it. I saw it on Sunday, where hailstorms in and around Mukono actually are breaking windscreens for cars. I had never seen that. And I'm not very young, as you can see. I'm tending to 50, and therefore something like this is very, very, very unique. And I thought that it was important that I begin with that. Some people are laughing that 50 is a young age. You need to know that there are not many people like me out there. Now, having said that, I'll dive deep into actually what is it that we can do to ensure that the private sector can take advantage of the opportunities that are emerging. One of these key things that actually could have been mentioned by the PS is strategic de-risking of exports. And I will discuss this at 3 levels. One, the markets that are natural export markets for Uganda are volatile by nature. You speak about Congo, you know what's happening at the border. You talk about Central African Republic, you talk about Somalia, go to Burundi, go to South Sudan, go beyond. Now, of course, I don't enjoy the scenario that we have already seen for South Sudan. And Madame Amelia has always done it very well when she was trade minister, taking people to parliament for compensations. I think we are no longer living in that age. People need to pick up insurance so that they can actually de-risk export trade, just like we do it for cars. When you have an accident, you don't look for a minister. You go to an insurance company, it sorts you out. This conversation has been on for some time, and I'm getting tired. Because we have an insurance regulatory authority whose job it is to come up with these products. For me, I speak straight. Government, please, if you are serious, have this out of the way in the next 6 months so that we don't come here to have this discussion again. That is true for many things. But the other aspect to facilitate actually the risking of exports is security export guarantees. And again, this speaks to having some conversation with the UPDF. The other day, because there was no convoy into Juba, traders could not cross into Juba. And we all watched. But I remember in 2005 when I first landed in Khartoum, we had actual arrangements for security. If there is anything that Uganda has done very well, is security. And what PS I would want us to see is to have conversations with the UPDF and see that we can get into Central African Republic because nobody could get there before, Ugandans, because of the security situation that is there. The uniqueness of these markets and our capacity to galvanize that security would actually take us to another level. But it all takes some action from government. And that is also another conversation I don't want us to discuss again. The UPDF is here, we don't have major wars now, they can be deployed towards facilitating that. Repurposing of infrastructure that we have. Yes, great, Uganda Airlines is doing great things, connecting tourism potential here. Can we also start looking at actually Uganda Airlines flying to connect markets? Yes, it is doing great for Dubai and so on. But how would it be if it could fly to Abuja, to Tripoli for purposes of delivering milk and high-value exports? We don't require new money, actually, to doing this. Because where I sit from private sector, we want to start with what we have. I hate it when people start cataloging what has to be done by government. There is something that government has already done. Can we repurpose this? The same goes to Uganda Air Cargo. I know many of these markets have their unique challenges, but I look at them as opportunities because we have such infrastructure that is not doing great for now because we have not repurposed them. So, colleagues and friends, I think that that is all that I could speak about de-risking. But the other aspect that is critical is dispute management. Dispute management is key because in trade, you will always have disputes. And the proposal that we have on the table is to really look at the regional economic blocks that we have established. For example, can we have an arbitration arrangement that is based in ECOWAS, another in ESC, we have COMESA and SADC, so that even before we get to be so sophisticated, there is an arrangement that can address trade disputes as and when they occur. Because, as a matter of fact, they will occur. We have seen it in South Sudan. We don't have to repeat that mistake again. Export capacity information validation. Yes, there is talk about our capacity to export, but when you challenge people with how much tonnage do we have locally, not many people can actually speak to the tonnage that we have. And of course, I saw somebody from WUBOS. Time is now to repurpose WUBOS. They are doing a great job on really documenting statistics and so on, but we need to do it now smart. We do it smart so that it can speak to how much of tomatoes that we can produce as a country, and such that we can then replace Belgium from Kinshasa for purposes of distribution of tomatoes, as an example. But this requires that actually we have strategic synergies between the Ministry of Trade, Uganda Manufacturers Association, Private Sector Foundation, Chamber of Commerce, and WUBOS to facilitate that intervention. Standards, I can't speak more for this. We know that actually standards are a must if you are to do export trade. And we know that one of our major challenges that we have is the speed at which we are able to standardize our products and certify them. The great news is that the former Minister of Trade had done a great job at UNBS, and I can salute you for that for a fact, because the speed at which Uganda is able now to put together standards is amazing at a regional level. We only need to take it to another level. Ugandans don't have a culture of celebrating what they do very well. And I want to encourage you to feel proud of what you can do very well. One area is standards. But the other thing that I need to discuss, and the PS is here for trade, is to now address the cost of certification and standardization, especially knowing that the majority of our exporters are SMEs. We need to have a conversation around that to facilitate them. Yes, the Bureau is looking at sourcing some financing from these kind of levies, but I think strategically we need to have it as an enabler to doing exports. Friends, I also want to bring additional hope in this conversation. There are some low-hanging fruits, because every time people come and speak here and they're talking about things that can only happen in 5 years, I don't like it so much as a private sector player. Because I know that there are certain things that we can actually cash on very quickly, and one of them is the exportation of excess power. You and I know that we already have excess power in Uganda, and you and I know that there is emergency power being consumed in Congo and Southern Sudan. We need to have a conversation that facilitates evacuation of this power so that it can be sold at that level. This does not require so much, and I can tell you that the private sector knows that there could be PPPs at a strategic level to facilitate this, such that we don't actually have to look at waiting for a railway line being done up to Abuja for us to start benefiting. So I thought that that was very important. But allow me also to share this. We have a great brand like Makerere University. And I don't know how many of you have actually appreciated the fact that we have something very unique. There can only be one Makerere in Kampala, Uganda. You could clap for this if you want. There can only be one. But the point I'm making, when people are struggling to come into Uganda for education, isn't it about time, for example, for the Minister of Trade to have bilaterals that allow for institutions like Makerere to train with other learning institutions on the continent? You start actually taking advantage of what we have without investing so much. Now, technology has enabled the fact that we can communicate very well with everybody across the globe without having to travel. Now, I'm looking at a scenario where people can actually study and get various awards from Makerere University without necessarily Makerere having to establish another campus elsewhere, but doing it virtually. I think that these are practical things that will connect Africans beyond actually meetings of this nature and beyond what we always envisage maybe for trade fairs and so on. Because the future for this trade is with the youth. The youth are the ones studying. I think conversations around this could facilitate that, but I think for Minister of Trade, what you need to do is to have conversations with the Minister of Trade and these institutions so that they start also really looking at what we are discussing, because at times they think that that is only for goods and for goods. Yet actually service exports is one of those areas that we can take advantage of. Optimizing Bubu. You spoke about Bubu, and the Honorable Amelia Chamba, they will tell you that I was one of those people who really harassed her when she was trade minister, until the time we could have Bubu, and until the time we had reservation guidelines. And of course, the essence of Bubu for export growth is galvanization of capacity. Because you can only always export after you have galvanized some critical mass in terms of numbers for volumes. Therefore, to the extent that we were still having reservation guidelines, the PS, and this is for you and team, we are looking forward really to regulations. Regulations made under the law that can facilitate expansion of capacities at a manufacturing level. I can tell you that on average, our installed capacity is utilized up to only now 56%. It means that by not having to invest even an additional dollar, you can you can almost double manufacturing output. Now, you can only do this if actually you created additional inertia for us to have a lot of production happening at a local level. This is with you, and we think we can only do it better. But allow me also to speak to aspects of research and development plus innovation. I was glad when I saw what the president was unveiling in terms of new technologies that are coming off Ugandans and so on. I want this to be structured for export competitiveness. And I think that the best way to doing it is by having the Ministry of Industry leading, such that people can understand that whatever they are innovating around should be of the type that can be sold not only in Uganda but beyond. I know this gentleman is coming. I have 2 minutes and I will utilize them. The other aspect that I need us to really think through is leveraging the private sector to unlock the capacity that is with the private sector in terms of infrastructure development. I was glad that the Trade Ministry had called us two weeks ago to discuss the strategy for the EFT, and it was great in Entebbe. But one of the things that we discovered while in Entebbe was that there is a lot of deficiencies when it comes to infrastructure. I could speak to things like quarantine centers in the agriculture sector. You could talk about testing centers, laboratories, etc. We know that we have a PPP law. PS, we don't have a PPP pipeline in Kampala. I have been to other jurisdictions on this continent. They always have a big pipeline of projects where government is participating with the private sector. We have a law that we have not fully taken advantage of. So the message I have for government, I know that the ceiling for borrowing is becoming tricky. We need to be innovative. The innovativeness speaks to leveraging the PPP law, and we look at joint financing of infrastructure projects. The very last thing, I sat with a money man, Kuda from the African Bank, and I will speak to the issues of access to capital, and especially long-term capital for this matter. I will tell you that for manufacturing, 90% of our credit is short-term, is from commercial banks. Now, I have not seen so many countries that have industrialized borrowing from commercial banks. So time is now to leverage people like my friend from Afriexim, but also at a local level. I know that we're seated on a mountain of money with the usual suspects that you know, the social security, insurance companies, and so on. Nobody is leveraging that for purposes of presenting available credit, long-term, good rates. This is key because if you are to compete with China, India, name them, they are actually borrowing from development finance banks. Whether it is Egypt, go to Ethiopia, South Africa, even next door Kenya, the story is not any different. Very lastly, I know this man wants the mic, but allow me to end with the issue of institutional support for this new imperative. Institutions are still very weak. I know that the Export Promotion Board is doing a great job, but it can do better. And all we're trying to say as private sector is that let us have our act together between government and the private sector so that these institutions are strengthened, but much more so. And I'm now scared that the PS has stepped out because we were doing a strategy to get into this market. Uganda's major challenge is not a lack of policies, but the implementation of the policies that actually we put together. So I am ending on that note to saying that the strategy, as we saw it, is a great document. We have participated in it, but we would want to start seeing building blocks happening. I thank you.
Another round of applause for Mubiru. Richard, I apologize for harassing you, but I note that you're still here with us. And even during the panel discussion, you never know, a question could be posed to you. Please do stay with us. But what we actually initially had wanted was for you to set the agenda for the panel discussion, the tone for the discussion, and you've ably done that. Don't you worry, when the PS steps away, there is a couple of her battalion commanders who are here. We have a few officers from the ministry, including the head of legal. So even those who draft those the policies are here. So don't worry. Everyone who is responsible and is supposed to be here is here from the ministry. Well, I could go into what Richard has said, but I guess that's what the panel will do. I'll not dig into that. But before I invite Mildred and the panel, allow me to invite Mama Bubu to come and talk to us, because this is your works. This is really part of your fruits. You are part of the building blocks to this free trade conversation. And you know the history of this conversation. It would be nice, Honorable Amelia, to come and share with us the journey. Very briefly, I don't know how to stop you when you're speaking, but I'll try and I'll try and stand when I think that you. Please, you're welcome, Honorable.
Thank you so much. Kindly allow me to remove my mask. I'm safe to vaccination so far. If there's a third one, I'm ready for it. So, Madame Elsie Atafour, UNDP Res Rep, our PS was just stepped out. Ms. Geraldine Sally, our commissioners, bankers, representatives of different organizations, members of the private sector, our protocol observed. I'm humbled to be part of the journey of our visionary leaders, like Kwame Nkrumah, who made a powerful speech in 1963 in Addis Ababa. He said, "We must unite now or perish." In 1999, President Muammar Gaddafi stated that we can build the United States of Africa. And our President, Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, has made a number of statements on how we can unite through our economic development, but also politically. Where are we now? Are we treading the pathways of our visionary leaders? Let me use this opportunity to thank Africa for the journey it has traveled so far, especially the establishment of the Secretariat and the role they have played in ensuring that we implement the agreement. Africa, with a population of 1.38 billion and GDP of 2.6 trillion, is a socio-economic heaven for its peoples as diversified as we are. How do we do business? In order to unify, we must have economic ties with each other. Africa's economy is premised on MSMEs, which account for more than 90% of the businesses and 60% of the employment. I'm aware that the topic today is enabling the private sector to drive the African Continental Free Trade Area. What is the role of a public sector? I cannot talk about Uganda only, but let me generalize first with Africa, then I'll talk about Uganda itself. In the public sector, African countries must ensure that we have affordable credit, skilling programs, enacting laws and regulations is key for the small businesses. And in Uganda, we have achieved that through the industrial policy, which I'm sure we'll be able to get in future. Industrial policy focuses, and it is with the support of UNDP. I'm glad UNDP is still traveling that pathway with us, and we thank you for that. The focus is on agro-based industries, and that is where mechanization comes in. Well, that is where affordable seedlings, affordable fertilizers, all these things come in, and under that policy, all those issues are stipulated. Extractive-based manufacturing industries. Extractive-based minerals or in the manufacturing industries, knowledge-intensive industries. Governments also in Africa should look at incentives in form of tax to enable SMEs to participate in business. Incubation programs for young businesses, like URI, would help the businesses to be able to compete. Deliberate actions to support women and youth should also be there. Regional interventions are the key, and most people have talked about them. We should enhance digitalization because it's the new norm now. We must communicate through digitalization. Consolidation of the global village concept. All member states should embrace that. We all know that the pandemic hit us. We should therefore focus on the standard requirements because we don't know when the pandemic is going. We don't know whether we're going to live with it like we lived with HIV. So vaccines, boosting our small businesses, looking at markets, but digitalization is key. Use of technology is key. African governments could recapitalize commercial banks. Uganda did that. And microfinance institutions. Tax rate reduction, export promotion. Now, what is Uganda's role in this? We have traveled this journey, but where are we? Fortunately, I was blessed to have been in this ministry when African Continental Free Trader was starting. And I feel that we should be more aggressive about some of these issues. For example, we should further strengthen the African Continental Free Trade and National Implementation Committee to respond to the African Continental Free Trade Area. Some other countries have done that. Ghana, Nigeria, South Africa, Rwanda, and they've moved. But we're also going to move. We were just moving, then we went into the pandemic. But that should not be our excuse. Let us participate in all trade fairs, currently in the Intra-African Trade Fair, which will commence in Durban. There is 15th to 21st December. There's an opportunity to close trade and investment deals. The African Investment Forum in December in Cote d'Ivoire, Uganda should participate. There is need to have an embassy opened in Ghana. This is very important. Or a consulate with experienced trade negotiators and market specialists to scan and open market opportunities in West Africa. You're talking about discussing with ECOWAS. We must have a base in order to do that. And also follow the African Continental Free Trade Area process from the heart of Accra, in Accra. We need to conduct high-level trade mission to West Africa in order to assess and lock in trade opportunities in that region. Infrastructure interconnectivity, ICT, energy, roads, rail, and air transport, as well as marine, are key in Africa. But these are also areas of investment that we can go in through formation of consortiums. Consortiums with not only Ugandans, but consortiums with other African partners. We have the Dangotes. We have the 500 major companies. Why don't we partner with them to be able to invest in some of these projects? I listened in to my brother. It is not the public sector to do all this. Private sector is there, but public sector should be an enabler to enable you to do business. Uganda is a private sector-led economy. The private sector, they are into banking, they're into insurance. Banks to introduce a paradigm shift towards MSMEs, because these MSMEs are the ones that are growing to a certain level, and the other ones that are exporting. By the way, Ugandans have already started exporting to other countries. They've already started opening up trade and services businesses. You go to Lusaka, you find banks, you find schools. You go to Zimbabwe, you go to... This BMK, we lost a great fellow, a great guru, industrial guru, not industrial, but a business guru, because he had already penetrated some of these markets. But the problem is information. How does it go around? The role of the international organization is very important. When you look at UNDP, UNDP has played a major role, especially In all these sectors, the socio-economic sectors, in trade they've been very supportive. I talked about the industrial policy. I talked, even this forum, there's so else, I don't even know how to thank you. Your Excellency, you know, she's my friend, so I always refer to her first name. We have other bodies that have been very supportive. Globally, all countries contribute to the organizations, so they should pay back. They should also contribute to us. IMF, World Bank, UNCTAD, African, and all those. Private sector should invest in enablers, as I've said, ICT, insurance, finance, but also for consortiums. I've already talked about that. Private sector to participate in continental trade fairs, I've talked about that. But industries should also employ and skill interns because of the high youth population. Seek partnerships amongst other member states, other members. You will never get information if you don't seek partnerships with other business people. Focus on both trade in goods and services. So what I always hear, Africa is so poor, the black Africa. We are not black, we are not poor. We are black, but we are not poor. What is Africa's prospective status? That is what we should start with. First of all, the political will. Political will is a prospect that we should honor. Political will by all these 54 countries to participate in this and to endorse. That is very important. 2, we should ask ourselves, are we able to trade aggressively and effectively within our targeted goals? I'm optimistic we can. Why? Agriculture, Africa has a huge potential in agribusiness. Africa has over 874 million hectares of wild arable land, but 600 is still uncultivated. We hold 9% of world's fresh water. What are we doing with it? Youth population skilling. Over 65 to 70% of Africa's population are youth. That constitutes a formidable workforce. However, for the youth to contribute to Africa's industrialization drive, they need skills. Skills, skills, skills. Mineral resources. African continent is sitting on more than 82 trillion US dollars of discovered natural resources. I've made this speech before, but I feel I have updated it and I feel I have to emphasize the potential we have and stop lamenting about our poverty. Poverty. What poverty? 82 trillion of discovered natural resources with a potential to contribute 30 billion in government revenue over the next 20 or more years. Africa is home to 5 of the 30 oil-producing nations in the world, and Uganda is joining. We will be the 6th. Africa, when you look at the nations, Nigeria, Algeria, Egypt, Angola, and Gabon, and now Uganda, they are all melting with oil. Oil in the ground, and here the private sector, we are crying, government help us, government help us. Government will help you with the finances. Government will help you when you show that you are moving. Government will help you when you have powerful strategic partners. You cannot do it alone. All that is mine. The mineral resources include gold, platinum, copper, uranium, iron ore. All that is mined and exported as primary product. Why? And re-imported in their finished form. How much value are we losing? Value addition is important. And we stand here and talk about these things. Implementation is the problem with Africa, not poverty, but executing our policies, implementing what we are supposed to do. Tourism. Look at tourism, agritourism, ecotourism. All forms of tourism are here in Africa. Let's take advantage of that. Investment in infrastructure development is an opportunity. If you're in the private sector, that is an area you could venture into. Today, tomorrow, or the other day. Women empowerment, Africa has done so well. Powerful women are here. Look at all these powerful women here. They are a resource. Let's use them. powerful economic bloc of 54 countries with 1.38 billion population. That is our power. We can negotiate with any other economic bloc. The role of African Continental Free Trade Area, I know, has been delved into in the last 3 days. So I need not go into that. I remember we formed working groups to address some issues. I don't know, I think they've gone. I'll read it from the report. They must have moved. But let African Continental Free Trade Area create a digital dashboard with shared information on the commodities and services contained in the respective member states, so that the private sector can know what we are supposed to buy, from where, at what cost, whom do we deal with. That is very important. African Continental Free Trade Area has an MSME desk. We'll pray that they also support SMEs, because some of them cannot afford to attend these trade fairs. African Continental Free Trade Area to drop a reasonable percentage of the tariffs and include policies aimed at eliminating non-tariff barriers, such as custom delays, to promote labor migration amongst the states. Am I able to move to Nigeria freely? Am I able to move to Ghana freely? Am I able to move to Sudan? Those are some of the challenges my brother is talking about. We need to significantly reorganize the global value chain. African Continental should create customs green lanes, in particular for medical, food products, and pharmaceutical products. Trade in services is the most important aspect in trade. It's also to start establishing service businesses in these countries. African countries should consider, in addition to African Continental Free Trade Area trade agreement, to support immediate trade facilitation measures like quick wins, prompt continental customs, clearance, rapid implementation of WTO trade facilitation agreement, and more fundamentally, address facilitation along corridors across the continent within the African Continental Free Trade Area. These moves would counterbalance the rising trade costs, improve the capacity of African countries to better benefit from the reorganization of their global value chain and regional value chain. I cannot conclude without talking about COVID-19 pandemic. Let's look at it positively in a way. It has robbed off of our people, but at the same time, it has changed the mode of doing business. Digitalization has come in, innovations have come in. We are able to produce things like masks, PPEs, and sanitizers, and all those sold, and many others. And there is a paradigm shift in the management of the attitude of the financial institutions towards MSMEs. It's not as bad as it used to be. At least now there is some form of consideration. And I'd like to end by quoting Psalm 23. Psalm 23, everybody knows that. Psalm 23, everybody knows it and recites it and says, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He restores my soul, guides me in paths of righteousness. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'll fear no evil. For you're with me and you comfort me." The journey we have traveled as Africa could be like a pathway. Pathways always lead to something. In this case, African Continental Free Trade Area is the pathway to hope, unity, prosperity, and self-reliance. It will lead us to our good shepherd, which is our destiny, Africa, the cause to unite, which is Africa. God bless you. Thank you so much for listening to me. Sorry.
Another round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for the Honorable Amelia Chambade. Amelia, thank you so much, first of all, for finding time in your schedule to come. and join us. It was nice to have you share your position on how far we have come as a country in unlocking our potential to benefit from the CFTA. If I spoke a little more, Mildred might kill me because it reduces the amount of time she has on her panel. So allow me to invite Mildred to Heise. I want in a very special way to applaud Elsie, because Elsie was clear on this gender inclusive conversation. And that not only men can be the ones at the front here talking about African issues. And today, unlike myself, yesterday Ben was wearing African attire. Today she's decided to come in an African attire. A touch of African attire. So ladies and gentlemen, please hand of applause for Mildred, who will run us through our panel discussion.
Thank you very much, Maurice Mugisha. Good afternoon to all of us. No, that's not a good afternoon of lunch. Good afternoon to all of us. This is our final day, but not final in terms of our discussion in this hall right there, right here, but not final at all in terms of implementing what we've been discussing. The success of this discussion will be going forward, putting into consideration and in action what we've been discussing this entire time. Otherwise, if we leave it all here, then we just wasted our time and had some good food and interacted, and that was just it all. But that's not where we want to be. And as it is today, we are looking at the private sector. And we know in Uganda, it is a private sector-led economy. We've sung this. But the question that comes through, every time for me the president says, Uganda is a private sector-led economy, my question is, how are we enabling the private sector to boost economic growth? How are we enabling the private sector to create more and more jobs? How are we enabling the private sector to thrive, as opposed to sometimes just looking at it as, a money-making venture in terms of taxes and the taxation question which was raised yesterday. Now, I was looking at the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development, Development Policy and Performance Policy portal, which was talking about Uganda's private sector being dominated by micro, small and medium enterprises, like the former minister did say, Honorable Amelia Chambade. And they're saying that Uganda has approximately about 1,100,000 enterprises. Those are employing approximately 2.5 million Ugandans, and that's equivalent to 90% of the non-farm private sector workers, and versatile in most of the sectors across the economy. Now, in most cases, when we talk about the private sector, when we talk about Uganda's economy, first, our minds go to agriculture, because, yes, a lot of our people are employed in the agriculture sector. Unfortunately, it's subsistence. Uganda has been named as one of the countries with which is most entrepreneurial. I think you've read all those statistics. But unfortunately, many of those businesses never live to see their first birthday. And there's so many issues. And some of those issues are what we want to be discussing today on this panel right here. And without wasting any more time, I will call up our panelists in no particular order. Like I've already said, these people have huge CVs, but because of time, I get to break down the CVs a little bit. I get to break protocol a little more and invite them in their capacity in the shortest form I can be able to do. So, ladies and gentlemen, those who are watching us on television, UBC TV, Inspiring Uganda, as well as NBS Television, thank you so much. And those who are joining us online, please, today I'll totally not forget about you. Those joining us online, because this is what COVID-19 has taught us. Allow me invite Mr. Dennis Aineviona, who is the Commissioner for Industry in the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Cooperatives. Mr. Aineviona, please feel free to take up your seat right here. A round of applause for him as he comes up. Yes, Mr. Aineviona is still tidying up a bit. We will also have Mr. Kudakwashe Matereke, who is the Regional Chief Operating Officer, East African Export-Import Bank. Mr. Kudakwashe, please. Kudakwashe, thank you so much. A round of applause for him. We are delighted to have you. We will also have Mr. Michael Mugabe, who is going to be represented actually by Angela Ndaula, the Head of Business and Institutional Banking. She will be representing the Managing Director, Housing Finance Bank. Ladies and gentlemen, let's invite Angela. We are talking about the women and women inclusion. Yeah, we're doing some name searching somewhere, somehow. So Angela, yes, you look for Mr. Michael Mugabe's name tag and sit right next to that seat. We will also have Mr. Francis Ogwang as one of our panelists. He's the Country Manager, East African Development Bank. Welcome, sir. And also we will have Mr. Alinda Hez Kimomi, who is the Executive Director of the Uganda Free Zones Authority. Mr. Kimomi, please feel free to come through and join us on, would we say high table, high podium? Whatever we would refer to it as. All right. We will also have Miss Olive Chigongo. Miss Olive Chigongo, I hope I've not, who will be represented actually. Miss Olive Chigongo is the President of the Uganda National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, but she will be represented by Mr. Samuel Mosoke Majwega. Welcome, Mr. Samuel Mosoke. And, well, thank you so much for joining us. And much later on, of course, we'll be joined by Mr. Dennis Aineviona. I think I'd seen Mr. Dennis Aineviona arrive, but he is still working up something. Many of you would be wondering why we have quite a number of banks here on the panel. But one of the issues we talked about, or we've talked about through the last 2 days, is the aspect of access to finance. Finance is becoming another song that we are singing, coupled with, well, we'll not talk about interest rates as much, but it's an issue. But away from that is the nitty-gritties that these MSMEs have to go through to access these finances in the banks. You have to do this, A, B, C, D. By the time you finish up checking all the list, you're literally tired and you need a holiday before you can think about it once again, you know, to go to the bank and be able to access this credit. And then at the end of it all, the terms and conditions that are set sometimes are too hard for these MSMEs to be able to access the finance. So we want to unlock, like we said, the padlock is there, right? But we want to get the key to unlock that padlock right there. And that is why we are going to be having this particular discussion. And in no particular order, I love to say ladies first unless there is danger. Where there is danger, we don't start with the ladies. So we start with the gentlemen, yeah? But I will start with Angela Ndaula, who is the Head of Business and Institutional Banking at Housing Finance Bank. We're talking about the private sector. And these are the people who always run to the banks. Of course, you need top up in terms of capital. You need some, you know, you need to be exporting and you need some extra capital sometimes, or you need to start. Some people use loans to start up their businesses. How can you as a bank, in what you do, make it an easier task for the private sector that is looking at engaging or reaping from the African Continental Free Trade Area?
Okay, thank you, Mildred, and thank you very, very much, UNDP, Madam Elsie, for this opportunity. Thank you to the Ministry of Trade for enabling this environment and this dialogue to happen. I'd like to thank all of you who are listening in all your various protocols. And again, Mildred, you were wondering how, as the bank, we get to support these people. Maybe I'll just start off with a brief about Housing Finance Bank, because rightly, because when you read the name Housing Finance Bank, all you think about is housing and mortgage. Now, originally, Housing Finance was a building society, which later, in 2007, acquired a commercial banking license, and we're now a fully fledged commercial bank. So this brief is just to demystify Housing Finance Bank and what we do. So in essence, what we do is everything commercial. And from our niche of the mortgages, where we are strong, we went out because our clients who used to be mortgage customers came in and said, I have this business, I have this farm, I have this enterprise, I have this school I'm running. How can you support me? So the conversation changed and stopped being about just housing. So it is basically about everything else, products, services that a commercial bank provides. Now, when I think about this African Continental Free Trade Area, yeah, there are a number of things that are happening, and for us it is very exciting. Why do I say it's very exciting? Because this is an opportunity, one, to let everyone know that we are also playing in this area, and we really want to support. And it is an opportunity for us to get to our customers. Now, free trade, SCFTA, what are we talking about? We are talking about government institutions. We are talking about development partners like UNDP. We are talking about the banking sector and the private sector. And what is it opening up for us? As banks, we are looking at single African market where we can trade as banks. We're looking at value addition for our products and services. And we're looking at export diversification. And then we are looking at increased job creation for Ugandans. Now, when an SME comes to me as a bank, what value addition am I going to give them? In the bank, we have advisory, because you notice that many of the micro or the SMEs may not necessarily know this, for example, this African Continental Free Trade Area, they don't know about it. So what is my role as the bank? Is to give them information, to tell them that we can do this together. And how? We form partnerships, for example, with UMA, with the Private Sector Foundation, I saw them here yesterday, with different entities, to make sure that our customer who doesn't know about this gets to know. And of course, as the bank, you think about financial services and access. So what services and products do we give these customers? So we as a bank are playing also in the trade area. We have bids, guarantees, because you know, definitely you can't trade without these trade instruments. So as the bank, those are some of the products and services we give to these customers. But besides that, there is something we call financial inclusion. When you go down to the micro or the SME, you notice that many have the basic, the basic information of how to do business. So how do we support them? Because we need to support them to formalize these businesses and make their products upskill, and be able to package and export or send to Kenya, send to Rwanda, and be able to access the markets. So we also support in our customers accessing markets. But that is only if we can support them to upskill and make their product acceptable across. So when Mama Bubu was talking about the different, I thought, well, it seems like we shared notes, because all the things she was talking about is what we as a private sector, as banks, should be supporting our customers with, not just financial or money, but all the services. Through our partnerships, give them access to the markets. So that is what I think that would support us in this passionate idea. Thank you.
Just before I let you go, you talked about an aspect of supporting customers access markets, and also mentioned an aspect of upskilling. Yeah. Now, we many a times talk about skills, but in the context of the CFTA, what skilling or upskilling would you be able to do, as, for example, Housing Finance Bank, that you have been doing, that we will need to pay attention to, because there are so many skills that we would be referring to, but what exactly do you pay attention to?
One, we pay attention to financial skills, because definitely to run a business, you must understand the financial aspect of it. You have to know, these are my costs, these are my overheads, and this is actually the profit. So you need to separate
some sort of bookkeeping.
Yes, bookkeeping, because that is basic, and it's important not to mix the books and then your business as usual. So that is part of the skilling that we do. Then we also train our customers to plan for the seasonalities. And we tell them when you have excess money, invest it. We have government securities, we have different forms of investment. Because sometimes you have a buffer and they think you should spend it, but not necessarily, because you can invest it and make more money out of it. So those are some of the basic skills that we provide.
All right, thank you very much, Angela. A round of applause for her. Well, we will continue with this discussion. Let me get to the policy side, and allow me we'll be talking to Mr. Dennis Ainebiona in just a bit. But just before probably I get to him, to you, Mr. Francis Ogwang, from the East African Development Bank, we're still looking at the banking sector. And it's unfortunate that only a small percentage of people have bank accounts, and that's a reality. Thank God for mobile money. Probably the financial inclusion would be at a worse stage if we weren't having mobile money services, because whether it is a mindset or it is an aspect of education, not many people as well have gotten into the banking sector. But how can you help the private sector? Number one, we want to increase that level. How many people are working with the banks? How do you help the private sector in that aspect?
Okay, thank you very much, Mildred. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks to the Ministry of Trade for putting together this forum. Thanks to UNDP for being part of it. As Mildred has said, my name is Francis Ogwang. I'm the country manager for the East African Development Bank in Uganda. The East African Development Bank is a 50-year-old plus institution. I'm sure you'll recall that it was, for those who are around, one of the institutions under the East African Community. When the community closed in 1977, because of the differences among the leaders at the time, the bank also closed. But then in 1980, because of the change in the leadership in the region at that time, the leaders got together again and restarted the bank, but under its own treaty rather than as part of the East African Community then. But again, I mean, we have a lot of relationship with the community currently. So in terms of governance and ownership, the bank is owned 88% by four governments of East Africa. That is Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, and Rwanda. Burundi and South Sudan have applied to join the membership of the East African Community, and they are yet to join. Now, in terms of our focus areas, what are the sectors that we focus on? Because we are semi-governmental, our focus sectors are really aligned to the development objectives of the various countries in which we operate, because we're supposed to support the government in realizing their development objectives. So you'll find that what Kenya may be pursuing might be slightly different from what Uganda is pursuing, same with Tanzania and same with Rwanda. But broadly, these are the things that we look at. One is industrialization. And we support industrialization by ensuring that we support projects in manufacturing. The second one is ensuring food security. And how do we ensure food security? We ensure food security by supporting agriculture, agribusiness, and all the activities along the agricultural value chain. We also support the development of power, energy, and mineral development in the various countries in which we operate. We also support projects, soft infrastructure projects. We call them soft infrastructure projects to differentiate it from the bigger infrastructure projects like the roads and the highways, you know, for $500, $600 million. Now, soft infrastructure projects when we say soft infrastructure, we're really talking about health and healthcare and education, because the governments in the region believe that the population must be healthy. You can only have a productive population when they're healthy. We also support education. I mean, we know that when people are educated, then their productivity is higher, then they're even able to earn, I mean, to be more useful to themselves and to the economy. And then we also support projects that support regional integration. You know, any project that is going to facilitate or support regional integration is an important project to the East African Development Bank. And last but not least is projects that mitigate the negative effect of climate change. We know that just last week, COP26 ended, and the climate change is a reality. Because of the activities of man, I mean, there's global warming, and now deliberate actions need to be taken to mitigate the effects of climate change. So, again, what type of energy sources are we using? Are we using renewable energy? Are we using fossil fuels? What are we doing to mitigate the negative effects of climate change? That is why, for us, the concept of the triple bottom line is very, very important. The people, the planet, and then the profitability for the investor. And last but not least, as a development bank, we support financial inclusion. And how do we do this? It is our moral responsibility to see that commercial banks develop. And how do we do this, therefore? We support development banks, and we support commercial banks by giving them lines of credit for own lending, you know, because our structure does not support having a presence in various districts. We therefore, for special impact projects, it could be in agriculture, it could be in diversity, biodiversity, you know, different, you know, women financing and youth financing. We normally channel those funds through commercial banks. We also provide commercial banks with technical assistance, you know, as a way of improving their skills, the skills of the staff, the skills of the board, the skills of their clients, you know, in financial literacy and many other activities and innovations, interventions that we undertake to be able to support the activities of commercial banks. Now, in as far as fostering financial inclusion is concerned, I mean, again, as I mentioned earlier, as a development bank, it is only important. You will drive true development if you have a bigger section of the population in the formal financial services sector. Uganda currently has a population of 43, 44 million people. But as we speak now, all bank accounts combined in all banks is hardly 5 million accounts. So if we probably discount that out of the 44 million people, some of them are children, not economically employed, others are elderly, at least we'll end up with 15 million economically active people. So the question is, if we have 15 million economically active people, and we only have 5 million bank accounts, then what's happening to the 10 million people? So that's why we're saying that we do undertake a lot of interventions, which I've just shared with you, to ensure that more and more and more people are brought into the fold of banking. That is why on a grants basis, you know, we're also able to extend grants to commercial banks to support them in their digitalization agenda, branchless banking, and other, you know, innovations that are sort of sweeping the financial services landscape that we have today. I mean, things around blockchain, things around cryptocurrencies, such discussions. We're able to hold them with a view of bringing as many people as possible into financial inclusion. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. We'll be coming back to what particular specifics with regard to the private sector are you already having in place to enable them. But let me take it to Mr. Kudakwashe Matereke. As the Export-Import Bank, when we are talking about trading, this is not a new phenomenon. It's not a new discussion. And I want to believe that you deal with the private sector as well. How are you helping them? How have you enabled them actually engage more in the trading business. And we're not only looking at within the countries, but also, I mean, inter-border kind of trade.
Thank you very much. Just a little bit of history. Afreximbank was established because of dislocation in the financial markets. You may recall in the 80s, we had some challenges in South America, which had an impact that it dried up access to funding for Africa because it was considered third world, because things that happened in Mexico, Brazil, and Argentina, third world was risky, and international lenders pulled out of Africa. African heads of states sat down and said, we need to establish a bank of our own, a trade finance bank, which would give access to trade, international trade, for African countries. We are here on the African continent to stay, but we know that some international lenders have a choice to pull out when it's no longer favoring them. We are here. So what are we doing as Afreximbank in light of the coming in of the Continental Free Trade Agreement? In fact, the bank was established with Continental Free Trade Agreement in mind, because we are here to support intra-Africa trade and extra-Africa trade. And we have got various instruments that we have in place in order to support intra-Africa trade. Number one, I hear issues relating to payments amongst African traders. We don't like it when our traders have to cross the border carrying US dollars, which they have changed at a bureau. Then they go to Busia, they cross into Kenya, they change the US dollars into Kenya shillings, they buy a few ways, then they cross the border. We have launched the Pan-African Payment Systems, PAPS. The Pan-African Payment and Settlement System is a system that enables African institutions, traders, to trade in local currency. So you can go to across the border, agree to buy maize, and the trader in Uganda wants to receive Uganda shillings, which is obviously commercially negotiated, and the trader in Kenya wants to part away with Kenya shillings. The two central banks will settle amongst themselves after every 2 weeks. After it's already piloted. I'm not talking the talk. It's piloted in the WAMS region, the West African Monetary Zone, and we are encouraging, and we have sent letters out to all the central banks to push for PAPS. PS, when this comes for discussion, please let's have PAPS signed up and implemented in East Africa. We need this to be implemented as a matter of urgency because it's no longer a dream. It has been launched in West Africa. So that's the Pan-African Payment Settlement System, PAPS.
I think a bigger round of applause for that.
Okay.
We were actually complaining about, the 41 currencies and how you can be able to harmonize.
That is good, and it is on the AFCFTA agenda. The Secretariat is on it. We now have PAPS as an institution, a multilateral institution established. It has a CEO, it has staff members running it as we speak today. We need African countries to accede to the agreements so that we can implement it. Number two, we are struggling with traders who are not known, who don't appear to have addresses. KYC is an issue, anti-money laundering, all those things. So if somebody gets a call from South Sudan and somebody's company XY, I need to buy such and such goods from you. How do you trace them? We have launched what we call the Mansa platform, where everyone can go in, load their information so that you are traceable. So Kudakwashe Enterprises, registered in Kampala. Kudakwashe is the director. You know who they are. Somebody like the Chamber of Commerce verifies that information. It gets loaded on the platform. Somebody wants to trade with a trader in Tanzania. They go onto the platform, check who Kudakwashe is. They know that they exist as an institution. You then take a decision on whether to trade with them or not, but at least you know that they exist. So the Mansa platform is going to reduce the cost of compliance that we face as traders, because we don't get to be accessed and we are not known to have. So you get a Mansa identifier as a trader, and by you having volunteered your information on that platform, a trader can take comfort across the border that you indeed exist as an institution.
Maybe, Mr. Kudakwashe, if I could just hold you a little bit. Does that also mean that sort of database, because I'm looking at it as a database, is also inclusive of the kind of products and goods traded? Because that's a discussion that came through yesterday.
Yes.
Of how do I, if I want to buy maize, how do I get to know all the suppliers of grain that I have in Uganda?
I'm coming to that, Mildred.
Okay.
There is also the trade information portal, which we are building. The trade information portal works like this. You are a trader in Egypt. You want to know who is the largest buyer in Uganda of ceramic tiles. You can go on that portal that we are building, and then you check who the traders are, who the suppliers are, and vice versa. If you're also a trader in Uganda, you go onto that portal, you check who are the largest suppliers of ceramic tiles in Egypt, so that you can check on them and see what they do, where their address is, what type of ceramic tiles they trade, etc. All that we are viewing that under what we call the Africa Trade Gateway, because information is the challenge, and we are responding to that. And it is all viewed in the context of promoting intra-Africa trade. Then, Honorable Chambade spoke about the intra-Africa Trade Fair.
Okay.
This weekend, from the 15th to the 21st, we are hosting the intra-Africa Trade Fair in Durban, KwaZulu-Natal. It's not trade between Africa and South Africa. It is a platform where African corporates, governments, state-owned enterprises go to exhibit what they do, so that as African traders walk past the fair, they can have knowledge of what other African traders specialize in. So much has been said about infrastructure, but there's an argument here, Mildred, to be listened to. If the current infrastructure, as weak as it is carrying $1 trillion of trade, why is our trade amongst Africans as weak as 16% compared to the world trade? It is because we don't have information. That is the reason why this platform is important. I don't know if you know that the first intra-Africa trade fair was in 1972. It died. It only woke up in 2018 in Cairo. This is the second edition.
Okay.
So we need that. Let me finish also on some other things that we are doing in order to promote intra-Africa trade. We launched what we call the Africa Collaborative Transit Guarantee Scheme. We want, with one piece of paper, goods to move from Cape Town to Cairo. The issue where traders have to issue several bonds at every border is a waste of time. It's costly and it's not efficient. So we have joined COMESA as an issuer of transit bonds, and we want our guarantee to be accepted at all border posts, so that just one document can cross the merchandise from Dar es Salaam to DRC, from Mombasa to South Sudan. Africa quality issues, goods that we produce, can they be marketed within our region? We lack standards, etc. We have launched what we call the Africa Quality Insurance Infrastructure. We are building in East Africa, a study is going on so that in Tanzania, for instance, can host a food and agricultural produce quality center. What does it do? If a commodity is certified out of that place across the African continent, that these goods are certified, they should find markets across all Africa so that we harmonize standards across the board with everyone accepting that when a good is certified out of this center, it is acceptable across
Africa.
Yes.
All right.
So these are some of the initiatives that Afreximbank, which is your bank because we are owned by 51 member countries, are doing in order to link the private sector into the continental free trade area. But I would not have done justice because there will be losses in revenue, etc. So as part of the Africa Union initiative, there's $1 billion that was set aside, which we call the adjustment fund. And I think it is interesting for that the ministry is represented here. The adjustment fund, what it does is we want to hear the story of how African corporates or African governments are likely to lose revenues because of opening up of the economies.
The economies,
and
yes.
then that fund will now be used to support African governments or even private sector so that they mitigate against those short-term losses as they adjust into the new era of the Continental Free Trade Agreement.
All right.
We are willing to listen to such an argument if it is coming from government of Uganda or any other government for that matter so that we can see how we can work together to help them adjust.
$1 billion US.
Yes,
Ladies and gentlemen, I mean, we were talking about some of these. We have to forego, and here we are having a fund that is just looking at dealing with those shocks. I know many African countries are accepting, because of Africanacity, if I would say so, for lack of a better word, but they're also looking in and saying, oh, we're going to lose this amount, we're going to lose this kind of money. But here is a shock absorber, for lack of a better word, a shock absorber for that. I think that deserved a bigger round of applause, unless we didn't really get to grasp it, because there is a lot of opportunity that is right there in the Afreximbank. And talking about opportunities and them being enhanced, let me get to Mr. Alinda Hez Kimomi from the Uganda Free Zones. Sorry, before I go to you, Mr. Kimomi, I need to go to Mr. Samuel Musoke from the Uganda National Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Yours is about enhancing opportunities. And we are asking ourselves how you are actually doing this, especially for the private sector, which is our focus of discussion this afternoon.
Thanks very much. Majwega Msoke Samuel are my names, and I'm the Vice President of the Uganda National Chamber of Commerce and Industries. Uganda National Chamber of Commerce and Industries is the oldest business trade organization in the country, celebrating 88 years this year. We are a private sector organization, trade organization. Ours is to look at our members. As the Uganda National Chamber of Commerce and Industries, we relate to other international chamber organizations like the Africa Chamber of Commerce, Islamic Chamber of Commerce, International Chamber of Commerce, and other country chamber organizations. Our chamber here in Kampala has a membership of over 30,000 Ugandan traders. So we have the traders with us and business people with us. The question you put to me is, how are we helping? The first thing which comes to mind and which we are doing is training. When we come here, this is in a way I would say elitism. For us, we are here, we are lucky, we can sit here. But the actual traders are out there in the field. The people who do business, who toil, who spend their lives or earn their livings on trading big and small, they are out there. And mostly this information we are giving here will not reach them from here. We need to have organizations, associations, trade organizations, which can relay this information to our traders, and the chamber comes out strongly in doing that. The other thing which we do is to link Ugandan business people with their counterparts in different countries through trade organizations, trade organizations. We do that. Where business people from, say, outside countries come here, and we link them to their Ugandan counterparts. Also, we take our trade organization to different countries so that they can benchmark and see what they can do, how they can do trade better. What I want to say is that when you look at, we move out and see different countries, we had a chance recently of being in Addis Ababa, and we saw how the economy of Addis Ababa has grown by just a mindset change, changing the way we look at things, looking away from looking to relate with Europe, America, but getting the technology from India, technology from China, basically simple technology which one can relate with easily. So that type of training, that type of exposure can, when somebody comes back here, can start something and see how to progress. We also learned my business, MK Publishers. I publish books, and I've moved from Uganda, Rwanda, Kenya, Tanzania, Ethiopia, and Zambia. In those countries, I've seen how, if you want to set up a company, you need, in most of them, especially Ethiopia and Zambia, you need to have a local partner. Okay. And that local partner has to have a percentage in the company which is being established. What am I driving at? My colleagues here have talked about access to financing. And in Uganda today, access to financing is very hard, very, very hard. And finances are very, very, very costly. If you are talking about an interest of 18, and my colleague said that most of the manufacturing loans are short-term loans at 18-20%. I had an opportunity to, I had a colleague who opened up a company 8 years ago in India, and he borrowed $5 million at an interest rate of 2-3%. Now, when you compare, even if we are talking about free trade in Africa, as Uganda, to be competitive, we need to really strongly address the issue of cost of financing. You cannot compete with, say, a country, and if I look at, say, I don't know, my colleagues here will guide me, but I think in East Africa, we have the highest interest rate in East Africa as a country. So we need to relook at that and see how do we compare with other countries where cost of financing is cheaper. As Chamber, as you can recall, I don't know whether you are aware, we've been at the forefront of pushing for the Islamic banking in this country. We need to see something different. We need to see that our people can access affordable financing, so that if you're looking at a situation where interest is so high and taxes are so high, so where is the trader? How can the trader grow? So these are issues which we really need to address very, very strongly. And For us, what we do best is to educate, go out there and educate, show our people the opportunities, like encouraging people to address equity financing. I don't know how much the banks are doing in relation to equity financing as a source of finance, as a source of development. Because if I have a project and I want to compete with in Uganda market or East African market or African market, and if I can get an equity investor into my project, it helps a lot, because access to financing is a problem. As Chamber, we have a project with Makerere University, which is funded by the German government, of offering internship to Makerere University students and other university students. Basically, okay, I want us to relate that to the idea of tertiary institutions developing programs in relation to the needs of the country, in the relations of the identified needs. I've seen this happen in countries like Germany, or even the US, where a university is relating with, say, Boeing. For example, there's a university in Louisiana, which was set, but everything they do is in relationship to what does Boeing require. Now we need to look at our institutions from that perspective, that the universities here, they are now around 41, they should be working together with the public, with the private sector, with the industrial, with the manufacturers, what is required, so that we have relevant knowledge. We are giving our students irrelevant knowledge. And for example, if we are talking about industrialization today, and the world is talking digitalization. Now this is the world, these are two worlds apart. You're talking about, we're talking now how to industrialize. Yes, it is what we should be talking about now, but the world has moved. The world is now talking industrialization, digitalization. Okay. A lot of high-tech products are what we are looking at.
Okay, so, yes. Mr. Majoge, as you wrap up, because we'll be coming back, the panel is still on.
Thank you very much.
All right. I will definitely be coming back to you. That's great work. I think I'll be asking the commercial banks why they're not picking up on Islamic banking, or what exactly needs to be coming through in that discussion on equity financing. But at least I know organizations or entities like the Microfinance Support Center has picked up on Islamic banking and is actually dealing with that particular one. Let me come to you, Mr. Linda Kimomi. At the Uganda Free Zones Authority, definitely yours is to regulate and license export processing zones and the free ports. But your purpose particularly, and this is what we are looking at, is to create opportunities for the export-oriented investment. And here we are looking export from Uganda to other African countries. How are you enabling the private sector to make sure that they can become competitive and they can be able to deal with the other counterparts away from Uganda?
Thank you very much, Mildred.
You can draw that closer, just a little closer. Draw the mic a little closer to yourself.
Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm happy to be here. Thank you, Minister of Trade, Industry and Cooperatives, for organizing this. UNDP, I'm happy to see my friend Geraldine. We last worked together some years ago. Honorable Chambade, Elsie, thank you very much. Let me just, Mildred, allow me to take off a few minutes to talk about free zones, export processing zones, free ports, special economic zones. In the context of East Africa, then we can move on to the continental level. In East Africa, we have a treaty for the establishment of the East African Community. There are 4 protocols that operationalize that treaty. We have the protocol on customs union, the protocol on common market, monetary union, political federation. Now, these schemes, export processing zones, special economic zones, free ports, free trade zones, are anchored in the Customs Union Protocol. Under Articles 25, that should be subsection 3, 29, and 31, partner states agreed to set up these schemes for purposes of promoting exports. And this was out of the realization that we lose a lot of value when we export raw materials, or sometimes we don't even export at all. We did an analysis. We export cotton, a unit of cotton at 1.6 US dollars, import the equivalent in fabric at $8. We are donating wealth. So as partner states, we agreed that we need to set up these schemes. And how do these schemes operate? Free zones, export processing zones, free trade zones, the nomenclatures vary from one country to another. Accord producers, accord exporters, accord investors, total tax relief. Total tax relief from import duties and export duties that would be applicable on exportation. So basically, we are creating an enclave where the trade rules are different from the rest of the customs territory. That's what it means now. The advantages that you get from or by operating a free zone, a special economic zone, these tax reliefs include exemption from excise duty, exemption from customs duties, exemption from VAT on goods supplied to the free zone, and also preferential treatment in other areas of tax. There are also advantages that are not of a fiscal nature, where you take advantage of the pre-built industrial sheds, pre-built industrial infrastructure, so that as an investor, as private sector, you do not have to, come set up the building and all that so that you can begin processing and exporting.
Okay.
Now, I'll just give you some statistics, and these are worrying statistics for us. Africa, less than 3% of global trade. That's what we do, but with 17% of the world population. Okay, the number for Uganda is really bad. Our participation in global export trade is 0.02%. We are almost not there. With a population of about 6% of the world, we are almost not there. So we want to make sure that people, entrepreneurs, can be facilitated. We, as Uganda Free Zones Authority, provide a hand-holding service. If you are an investor, whether domestic, what we call domestic direct investment, or a foreigner, foreign direct investment, we will handhold you through our investor support services so that you are able to walk through the entire journey from the time you come into the country to the time you actually export your product. Okay. When you find a problem with URA, we are there. When you find a problem with any other agents of government, we are there. And we are learning from success stories. I'll give you the success story of India. In 2003, India had 0.72% of global export trade. 2003, they put in place a robust export promotion scheme. And by 2008, they had created another 0.92%, increasing their value of participation in global export trade from 0.72% in 2003 to 1.64% in 2008, creating 14 million jobs along that value chain. That's what we should be able to do here. Now, as Uganda Free Zones Authority, our main purpose is to create opportunities for export-oriented investment and job creation. That's what we want to do. Our mandate is to establish, develop, manage, maintain, market, supervise free zones in Uganda and provide for any other related matters.
Okay.
I also have some, yesterday I was listening in and there was a discussion about tax.
Okay.
Tax, are we a high tax rate country? Is it appropriate? And how about our tax to GDP ratio? How do the two compare? Where do you find the middle ground? Ghana, where else comes from? Their corporate income tax is about 25%. But for the free zones, it is actually 0% for the first 10 years. And after 10 years, then you have 8%, CIT, 8%.
Okay.
In Kenya, they are moving away from the EPZ that we're operating here, and they are creating a system where they have a special economic zone, and for the corporate income tax, the first 10 years, you have 10%, and thereafter another 10 years, 15%. But their tax to GDP ratio is higher than Uganda. The tax to GDP ratio of Kenya is about 16%. Ghana is higher than Uganda. So what are we doing with these high tax rates that are not delivering what we want? That's the question.
Okay.
We should be able to look at that. And there's the other issue of, you know, in this country, when you are a foreigner and you want to invest, in order to access the tax exemption on CIT, you must be able to invest $50 million. $50 million. And when you are a national, domestic direct investment, $10 million. Now, that is defeatist, in my opinion.
Huge. Yes.
How many Ugandans have $10 million to invest in production for export? Considering that we have barriers to entry in terms of quality, in terms of pricing. Now, I was looking at the economy of the United Kingdom. Over 99% are small and micro, they are called what? SMEs.
Yes.
Small and micro enterprises. In the United States, almost the same, about 99%, 98%. In Uganda, somebody gave the numbers about 1.1 million
yes.
businesses, but over 900,000 of those are small and micro. So we need to make policies work for the majority of businesses. We need to enable the small and micro enterprises export by according them similar or equivalent benefits to the big boys and the big girls.
Oh, yes.
That is very, very important. The other issue that I want to talk about is the issue of land. Land for industrialization, land for investment. This country has 42 million people today. By 2050, the statistics are very clear. Over 100 million people. But we're already experiencing pressure on land. So the issue of Uganda Free Zones Authority, Uganda Investment Authority, you know, begging for land, that must stop. We need to have a deliberate and intentional government policy. Every district must put aside at least a minimum of 5 square miles. If we're building to supply Africa, instead of looking at these small pieces of 200 acres, 500 acres, Namamve is done. It's finished in a few years. And if we do not do that, the demographic dividend that we are talking about will become a demographic disaster.
Okay.
Because
we don't want to get there.
Able to provide the jobs that the youth deserve.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. And maybe just before we go to our plenary session, allow me to take this one to Mr. Francis Ogwang as well as Angela. On the involvement of the youth and the women in ensuring that they're helped to expand either startup businesses because they're also involved in the private sector, but also the lessons taken from dealing with shocks. COVID-19 came, yes, no one was prepared for it, but what lessons are we taking through? Because when it comes to the side of the banks, for example, in the private sector, there are many people who had accessed loans. There was a lot of loan restructuring. They probably did not even understand. They thought, oh, it's a leeway, we are not going to be paying, not knowing the burden that they would later on actually be taking on. Let's look at the lessons we are taking that we are going to move forward with as we're dealing with the private sector to, gain from the African Continental Free Trade Area, but the women and the youth as well. I'll start off with you, Mr. Francis Ogwang, just shortly.
Thank you very much, Mildred. Like I mentioned earlier, now women and youth financing are what we call the special interest groups at the EADB. And what I can tell you is that what we normally do is to provide them with affordable financing. Mr. Majuega mentioned that the pricing for shilling loans today, plus or minus, on average, is about 18%. Now, what we do at the EADB is to, and I'm going to talk numbers, is to ensure that at least we are able to lend to the commercial banks at single-digit figures, at an interest rate of a single-digit figure, which is anything about like 8-9%. So that then, of course, they are able to load on a small margin for administrative admin expenses, which they own lend to the public.
And small margin being relative in this discussion.
Okay.
That's why you're hearing some laughter in the audience.
Our understanding is that if they can load on a margin of about 3%, so that the end beneficiary probably is able to take it at about 12%. I think that is still affordable.
Okay.
That is still affordable, rather than the 18-19% that we are talking about. Yes. Now this applies to the youth as well. But then we know that just giving money is not enough. So what we are doing currently is to come up with special empowerment skills improvement programs, for the women and for the youth, so that they are able to utilize these funds in a better way. Now, in respect to COVID, like Honorable Melia said earlier, when COVID came, nobody anticipated it. We do not have experience in dealing with COVID. But what we did was we know that because nobody expected COVID to come here, the first thing that we did was to offer a moratorium to our clients, but not across the board. Not across the board. And this is what I mean, that there are sectors that made a lot of money during COVID. The health sector, sort of across the value chain, they made money. Manufacturing made a lot of money. Telecom and service, sale of data and things like that made a lot of money. But the sectors that were affected negatively, for example, were schools. So for the schools, we gave them moratoriums. Actually, we continue to give them moratoriums because now we know that it has been said that schools will start with in January when we achieve a certain level of vaccination. So really, sort of to wrap it up and to sum it up, I think there is no better time than now for financial institutions to stand with their clients and their customers. Okay. And this is what we have done at the EADB. But we also know that as a development bank, it is our role to continue putting money into the economy, to ensure that there is continuity. So I would like to say that for projects where we had made commitments, we continue to support those projects.
Okay.
And as we speak now, we continue to support new projects that are even responding to special needs and special requirements. For example, we have funded I think one of the biggest glove factories in this region, because, gloves are part of really personal PPEs, and many other things like that. Okay. And for me, I think I would like to take this opportunity, request members of the public sector who are present here, policymakers, heads of government departments, please feel free to approach the East African Development Bank. Our offices are just behind Bank of Uganda, so that we can be able to see what we can be able to do together. Mr. Majwega was talking about the cost of financing. Mr. Majwega was talking about the cost of financing. I'd like to say that our pricing definitely is below commercial bank rate.
You'll still say it's a single digit.
No. My colleague Kuda is here, and that's what we're supposed to do.
Kuda will be coming through. Let me come to you, Angela, still on the aspect of dealing with shocks. He's talking about holding your customers. I remember at university while I was doing my project, it was a student loan management system, and we were trying to do a bit of research across different banks. But there was this manager of a bank I will not be able to mention. She mentioned one statement, I'll never forget it my entire life. I told you that. She said to me, a bank is a rich man with no soul, period. And many a time, some of the people and private businesses have complained about that aspect coming to pass. Has COVID taught us differently? And also on the side of the youth and the women being considered special categories. What incentives do you have? What do you have in line for them as they participate in trade?
Okay, thank you, Mildred. I'll speak to the COVID-19 first of all, shocks. And as you are aware, Housing Finance Bank is part of the Uganda Bankers Association.
Yes.
And as a conglomerate of the banks, we have come up with support measures to absorb the shock. And if you're aware or not aware, we are actually restructuring many of the financial obligations from the tourism sector and the education sector that were hard hit by the COVID-19. And we have a number of moratoriums that we are also handling. So we are not, what should I call it?
That rich
we are
man,
not heartless. Yeah, we are not heartless, and we are well cognizant of that fact because these are our customers. So we walk the journey with them to make sure that even when things are bad, we are with them, and when things are good, we are still with them.
You don't remind us that the money is not yours, that you're using.
Yeah.
All right,
now,
go ahead.
On women and youth, what we realized is that the challenges are maybe the same, but women may be more disadvantaged, especially when it comes to land laws, possession, ownership, and then, of course, the domestic aspect of it. But what we have done, especially as a bank, we have partnered with some funding partners like EIB and ABI Finance, whereby we look at the percentage. For example, we get funds from them at a certain price, and we on lend to women enterprises, but they're at a lower price, so that we encourage the women. And in addition, for example, the EIB fund that we are working with, we have gotten insights into women-led businesses and how we can support them. So we are cognizant of that fact that women and youth need support. So we do not just take it for granted and sit down. We are trying as much as possible to support them.
Through.
Yeah.
All right. I will at this moment, as we will go for a plenary for just a minute before we receive another keynote presentation. But before I go to Ben, Mr. Kudakwashe, I'm coming to you. On the aspect of cost of finance, it still remains huge. And I know it's not only in Uganda, but it's also across Africa and many other countries. We had a suggestion coming through from Mr. Majwega on the aspect of Islamic banking being adopted and then aspects of equity financing. Are these too hard to grasp on the market to be able to help the private sector?
Thank you very much, Mildred. I think it feels like it is very risky being a banker. But I don't think it is. I think it's genuine questions being asked because of the stage where we are at as Uganda, as we develop and as we seek to access markets. These questions are real. They need to be addressed properly.
Yeah.
But nobody wants their banker to lend money at a loss because you are the first one to withdraw your deposits when should that happen. Now, what is Afreximbank doing? Our balance sheet is a US dollar-based or euro-based balance sheet. As you can imagine, you can't lend to 51 African countries in their own currencies. So our balance sheet is a US dollar balance sheet. However, we can lend in local currency through some programs. If there was demand in Uganda to lend in Uganda shillings, we can go into the market, raise Uganda shillings, but we have to know who will absorb those Uganda shillings, because if you have a US dollar balance sheet, having a loan in Uganda shillings is risky because you need to mitigate against the different currencies. So now we go to the market to borrow money. And we have to price the risk. Let's run away from the tendency of just saying that banks are overpricing. Banks are pricing risk that they see.
Okay.
Banks review financials and then they allocate a risk grade which attracts a certain pricing. Let me rest my case there.
All right.
Because we can go on and on, etc. But now there is so many ways in which we can also mitigate against the challenges of pricing. I think in Uganda there is institutions that raise local currency. That money can also be put into a pool, and then the authorities here can direct certain funding to go to specific sectors at a particular pricing so that those sectors may be protected from the risks of higher prices.
Thank you.
That's what I would like to say about that particular subject matter.
Thank you. I see this discussion actually goes back to government, and it's very sad that we didn't have the representative from the ministry, but the permanent secretary is actually here, and she's taking this. And I also want to believe it goes back to our legislation. Which policies are we putting in place? Which legislations do we have that enable a fair environment for the banks to be able to thrive, but also be able to, help the private sector? Ben, I think it's time for for us to get into our plenary before we can get our keynote presentation as well from Joy.
Thank you, Mildred. Again, we will definitely be looking forward to hearing from Joy. Some house rules for our plenary. Again, I'm sure all of us are familiar with the concept of a news bulletin, which starts with headlines and then goes into a main bulletin. Our plenary is headlines, right? Again, our dialogue is simply to set the tone for discussions for something that should go on beyond what we're talking about. And so I do know that we have a lot of things to say, but I'm going to request that we sort of summarize them and pick just that one point. So again, the rules are very simple. You will stand up, tell us your name, and then make your question or comment, and I'll ask us to keep it under 1 minute. Again, because it's a summary and headlines, for the discussion continues long after this. I'll also request that we'll give priority to the people who have not spoken yet, so that we can try and be inclusive, as you can imagine. I'll start online. Mildred, we've got a message here from Reverend Canon Everett Mugara, who is a little bit unhappy. He says he's listening to all these strategies that are desired to see the dream for cross-border trade. He says they're excellent. He says the question that has not been touched is the issue of quality services and products, and what he calls common behavior for love of fake services and products in every part of the country. I don't know if he's being too harsh on us. I don't think we love the fake products, just that they happen to be there. And he also says that we should also be asking those who have penetrated trade across the border already for testimonies and for practical purposes. And so that's just something to point out. Again, like we said, this is just the beginning of the discussion, and it will continue even long after today. So let's start here, and then we'll go around the room. When we come to you, please do stand, and then we'll have someone bring the microphone to you. Please remember to keep it brief so we can have as many people as possible before we go back to Joy.
Thank you very much. Robert Shigongo is my name. Agenda 2063, the Africa we want. In Uganda's context, How can we achieve it with the current direct taxation on data? This is increasing the cost of doing business in the fourth industrial revolution. To the government, what's your equity in this very project? UNDP has presented a very wonderful aspiration. What's your equity in making it a reality? Are you planning to decentralize it so that we don't stop in boardrooms and we engage the real stakeholders whom Mr. MK spoke about? Instead of just sitting here in the room, we need to go to the regions and follow the matrix of problems and solutions that are available so that we can have inclusive participation and meaningful participation of everybody. What is the roadmap for inclusive and meaningful participation? I don't want this kind of opportunity to remain among the big boys. As you know, in Uganda, definitely, this kind of opportunities are limited to a few big boys. How can we engage? For example, in Masaka, we have a consortium for pineapple growers and other commodities. How do we approach them exactly? And we bring them on board. We've spoken a lot of good English and everything, but how do we get the common person on board exactly? I want to see that clearly out. I want to hear a roadmap for that. Thank you. But the cost of doing business, I request the government and the Ministry of Trade, if you can engage Ministry of ICT and Finance to deal with this taxation on direct data.
12%.
It's really doing us very bad, and we are very disappointed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I should point out for your benefit that the government is actually your host today. So don't thank the UNDP for the lunch. The government is actually your host. What the UNDP is doing is facilitating the conversation, okay? It's just that Madame PS has just started. She hasn't had a chance to print some new banners for the ministry yet. So that's why you might see a bit more UNDP, but please understand, you're being hosted by the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Cooperatives. Over to you.
Thank you, Mwine. Am I loud enough?
Yes.
Thank you, Mwine. I'll start with special appreciations, not only to the UN, but more importantly to the private sector. I think you're the game changers. And again, I'll also thank you to those who are here. My name is Brian Tosh. I work and live conservation. I work with the Umoja Conservation Trust. And for me, the first point to you is all this brilliant talk we've done, excellent. I don't see the key element, the key binding factor, which is conservation. I don't see how we're going to be able to achieve all this sustainably for a long time. And I'll give reasons why. The extractive industry has been responsible for close to 60 to 70% of the carbon emissions, not only in Uganda, but worldwide. And for a very long time, we've been making billions of shillings and dollars in the gold sector, in the mining, name it. And we're slowly coming to a halt, as you've seen in the coal sector in the developed countries. And yet, Africa, we have a comparative advantage of getting a sector that is purely agro-based. Purely agro-based. And that's the only way we'll have a sustainable, long-term comparative advantage. So I'm not hearing this debate. Madam PS, where is that debate happening? Is it in State House? Is it at cabinet level? Is it at PS level? I don't see that.
We actually had a bit of that yesterday and the past day as well. The fact is today we were focusing more on the private sector and how it can be enabled.
And that's exactly my point.
Yes.
I say it again at the beginning, my dear, that it's the private sector that's going to be game-changing.
Okay.
If I can give you one example, NFA only has 11% of all the forests in Uganda.
Sure.
To date.
True.
But in 1974, Uganda had over 80% of its land under forest cover. To date, fast forward, we've lost close to 61%. I don't know what's the latest official position for Uganda, but UN, we're at about 60-something%. So if we could constructively work out our comparative advantage of the green, the industries around our green, I think for me that would be the kingmaker.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That's a very good point. We'll come to the gentleman. Let's come here to the front first. Just so you know, actually the stats are quite disturbing about deforestation. Apparently, at some point in the future, our kids will be asking in Uganda, what is a tree? From the way things are apparently going.
Thank you so much. My name is Dixon Tukamusi Machabaseta.
A little louder, my dear.
I'm Dixon Tukamusi Machabaseta. Too much of a name, but it's okay. I lead the cashew nut, the Uganda cashew nut value chain in Uganda. I'm the executive director. So I have questions, but I think let's just make it easy. We've had a series of discussions. Yesterday, the other day, I was here yesterday. So I had people talk. And personally, as you hear, I am looking at something that I think is maybe a high value crop, which could be added on the chain. So maybe it can be funded, but I'm thinking, you guys, when we get here, you see the discussion, now it's private sector. Surprisingly, we have the banks all here. These are people who are supposed to actually maybe help us out of poverty. I'm here thinking to myself, and I want to ask you all, are we really going to borrow ourselves through the banks out of poverty? That's my loud question. And I would wish we all hear through it. And then again, you know, the cost of doing business here. Me, I'm thinking about a high value crop. I don't know how the other guys who do maize, where a kilo is 300 shillings, how they do it. I don't know what that miracle is. Maybe they know how they do it. But me, I'm asking myself, the payments of profit, when you get a loan, like you give these local people of ours, when you pay principal and interest, it gets really absorbingly high, and you wonder how people are actually doing it. Me, I'm thinking out of the blue, I will deal with my cashew nuts. It's actually a very high value thing. It's about 15 times coffee. And I'm thinking people will actually get into it. Of course, there is no land, as they're telling you, but we have to find ways. A tree can give you miracles. But now I'm thinking, the cost of doing business is actually too high. Guys who do maize, who do beans, how do you do it? How do we get out of this? Are we going to borrow ourselves out of poverty? Really? Surely.
Thank you. You remind me of the stories we've had around where people started with a feather and ended up with a cow, a farm with 2,000 cows. I'm sure we've had those. Let's come to you, and then we'll continue, and then we'll come back to Mildred in a bit. You can use mine.
Thank you, Ben. A good afternoon to you, ladies and gentlemen. Again, my name is Bob Rayman Kabango from the Uganda Small Scale Industries Association. My question is to Mr. Francis Ogwang from the EADB. You mentioned the key point on skilling, where you emphasize the financial literacy skilling that you do, and you basically do it through the banks. My recommendation or my question is, you realize that many of these entrepreneurs that we are trying to prepare for this African Continental Free Trade area need a lot of this skilling, especially in financial literacy. This is what we are lacking. My question is, have you actually tried to think of doing it through some of these organizations that actually reach down to the grassroots of these entrepreneurs? Because if you ask me, the banks that you are working through are limited to for example, the people who have accounts in those banks. But we have these organizations that bring together these entrepreneurs and groups. If I mention Uzia that I come from, that might be risking maybe out of bias. But if, for example, I say, if you wanted, for example, to skill the women in entrepreneurship, would you, for example, work through an organization like You Will that brings together women? For example, we have Yumfe, if you want to skill the farmers. So instead of working through these banks, I believe if you also partner with some of these organizations that actually bring the entrepreneurs, it would actually have a bigger impact. Because if we focus on the 5 million and the other 15 million that you talked about are not reached out to, then at the end of the day, we also risk also not benefiting or being prepared when this opportunity comes to us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right. We have another comment here online from someone called Ruavihurwa, who says AFCFTA is a great idea. He says, however, there are African countries, and I think this was mentioned yesterday or the day before, there are African countries which cannot connect without having to go through Europe first. What's our game plan to try and connect countries here on the continent?
Thank you so much for this opportunity. Hello? Okay. My name is Alinda Jocelyn. I'm from National Arts and Cultural Crafts Association of Uganda. I've had a mention of Bubu in this room, and I think the women have ably represented. The men, where are you? At least have a bow tie. You'll have supported us. Yeah, they can support us at least with a bow tie. You don't have to have everything. At least I've seen one gentleman there. Thank you very much. You are supporting us.
The men had.
I don't see much of us, but at least there's one picture there. That is Bubu. Please continue supporting us. We shan't be begging the banks to give us credit. Then when we talk of a free trade area, I've failed to understand this. We have been given a number of opportunities, but government, I don't know where you are. I'm looking at the Expo Dubai, and I'm very concerned. It's running for 6 months. And every time you ask about it, they'll tell you, wait a bit, 6 months. We participated in China, Shanghai, and Milan. The feedback was very good. Coffee and handcrafts, which were very aggressive, because handcrafts, we pay for our tickets. We are given the opportunity of space, and that is all we are begging for. If you can talk about showcasing, give us the space, the rest we'll try to support ourselves, because the people I see there, they are given per diem. For us, we pay transport, we pay accommodation. All we need is that small space. He talked of, we'll see them. The market is there. They are not even running virtual. I don't know. I've not seen anything running virtual. Please do something at least about the virtual exhibition. We'll be grateful about that. One more. For so many, just a moment. For so many years, crafts have represented Uganda. Please, we need, give us something small back into the handcraft. We need your support.
All right, for purposes of time, I think we'll need to move on. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mildred. I'll take one more lady and then we'll come to you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Sarah Nanyanzi. I deal in African wear. I go to Lagos. I go to Accra, been to Abidjan. I've been banking with housing finance. I started when I was 20 years young. I don't know how old I am now. You people
You definitely know.
But I got challenges sometime. Try to approach the bank. They keep telling me tomorrow, the other day, keep on banking. And I wonder how. I'm already down. Then what do I bank? I'm at Cham Towers, 18 years there. I was connected to West Africa by the late ambassador, Mr. Onen. Now, my shop is closed. 7 months now. I approached housing finance. They kept on telling me, no, not even tomorrow. You bank. Now, what do I bank? I got challenges. I went into land business. Then I bought air. There in this and that. I went down completely and also. Everything of mine is down completely, except the flesh I have. Otherwise, I'm on zero.
Yes.
All those, now the relationship managers, they were, when I used to bank, they used to be on the counters, cashiers. Nobody doesn't know me. Now I don't know. When I heard that madam say, when I entered here, I saw housing finance. I said, what, am I in the right place or in the wrong place? To be sincere, I told this girl here, why is housing finance here? I used to bank with housing finance. If you go through, until, I don't know.
Sorry.
I'm on zero.
Madam Angela is here.
My shop was closed since March up to now. Cham Towers, shop 15. Nobody doesn't, most of the people know my shop. Me, when I go to Nigeria, they say, Oga, Oga, why they lost? When I go to Accra, they say, Akwaba, they call me Apuskelik. Why they lost?
Sorry. And thankfully, we also have Caroline Navunya in the house, who is the head of Trade Finance, Housing Finance. A grieved customer here that needs to be dealt with, definitely. There is just a lady, just one, and that is if she will keep the time. I'll give her one for the women.
Right. And the question here for our finance people as well, about what efforts we are trying to make to improve the problem with our currency, because in a lot of countries, apparently, the Uganda shilling is, let's just say, almost frowned upon. If you can kindly speak to that, I don't know if that's a genuine problem, and how do we deal with that?
Thank you so much. I'll talk for the senior citizens running through families, as I said yesterday. But I'm glad that the academia was here, was represented by the Sasan sub-body, but I don't see him. But why am I saying family businesses? Because whatever we are doing here, it's going to come to the Kurwazi, because we are not recognizing where the problem is coming from. The problem is emancipating right from our homes, families, run through up to the parishes, the what, Masaza, Gombolola, the district, and the Uganda and beyond. So I think what I want to say is somebody's throwing trainings, Uzia. Another one, Chamber of Commerce training. Another one, training. What are you training? When we from Makerere University, we are here. We are taking our jobs. Even when we are doing our jobs, we are producing semi-literates. They can't do business. I'm a holder of master's degree in business administration. I have a Bachelor of Commerce. I'm pursuing to do my PhD in entrepreneurship. But for what? When the lots don't understand these things. Let's go back to the grassroots, family, homes, families, and blah, blah. Because I have a background from an Islamic background, we are traders as Muslims, and we succeed. But because of you are coming in our line, you are making us go down. The example of her.
Okay, okay. Please, Ben. All right, thank you very much, Ben. We will be getting back to plenary at a later stage, but we need to manage up a little bit of time, but I think the tempers are going a little bit high, but we will be able to deal with that. These are the realities that we were talking about much earlier on. But just before we get to wrap up with our panel, I know there's some questions that have come through. There's some complaints that have come through directly. I'll give each one of us about 2 minutes max to be able to wrap up. Our TV time is running out, but then we need to also get a presentation from Joy just before we get to close. So in no particular order, let me start off with Angela to answer some of the questions, some of the grievances that came through, but also do a wrap-up in about 2 minutes.
Okay. Thank you, Mildred. And I'll start off with you, Sarah. Really, it's unfortunate, but I'm here, and I have a colleague there, Carol. We can talk after this, because it's good that you raise the grievance, and that is business, so we shall work it out. That's just what I can tell you. And then my wrapping comments are that the African Continental free trade zone is here. And what do we need to do? I think talking is not enough. Yeah, just discussing is not enough. I think the next best step is to actualize these discussions. And as a bank, I think we will not take it at this level. We will take it a notch higher. And you'll see us more often, so please watch out for us. And we'll make sure that this discussion enhances our customer, who is very dear to us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll keep out on the look. The media is watching very, very much. Mr. Samuel Musoke Majwega, welcome to you with responding to a few of the discussions, but also in just a few minutes, do your wrap-up.
Thanks very much. What comes as a comment, I want to comment about training for what. I think training should be done by everybody, because at their level, at the academia level, that is educating, but this skills, hands-on, to be given to all the people in this country. All of us should put our hands together and train our people. I just want to thank the organizers for inviting us, Uganda National Chamber of Commerce, to be part of this. It's been a great opportunity for us to talk to you here, the participants. As Chamber of Commerce, we will continue to do what the country wants of us, what our members want from us, to ensure that they get the services, they get, we do advocacy for them, and we train them, and we look for source for affordable finances and look for partners for them.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you so much, Mr. Kudakwashe. Over to you for your closing remarks, but a few comments as well that came through.
Yes, thank you very much. I think I want to respond to the point that was raised regarding small-scale producers and how they can scale up.
Yes.
We have a program where we encourage the establishment of export trading companies in countries so that they can aggregate the various produce from different producers. Because as we enter into the Continental Free Trade Agreement, it's highly unlikely that individual farmers can be competitive. How about setting up an export trading company for Uganda, which aggregates the various manufacturing or various production so that they can export representing various producers? That's the only way in which competitiveness can be achieved. There is no reason why we should expect that an individual pineapple farmer with 2 acres of pineapples can compete in the African market without support from export trading companies. I am told that the trading companies in Japan today started very small by being aggregators. So aggregate, and you can do it according to the produce and have those producers in those sectors raise the production levels or the export quantities that are adequate to make it efficient for the export markets. We also run some courses that we can organize on getting ready for export. I think we should be having a conversation with the ministry on that. And we are willing to work with UNDP and other agencies so that we can prepare our certain groups that are deemed ready so that they can start producing for exports.
Okay.
There was a point you mentioned about equity. Naturally, banks cannot also be the same providers of equity and lend to the same institutions that probably they own indirectly. So Afreximbank set up the Fund for Export Development. It's an institution that is headquartered in Kigali, Rwanda. And the purpose is to invest in export-oriented enterprises on the African continent. Because as a bank, we cannot take equity in institutions. So that one was set up, and we are willing to engage with parties that are seriously considering exports so that FEDA, which is the Fund for Export Development in Africa, can take up equity and prepare those companies as a way of raising capital for them. Then one last point is the current intra-Africa trade fair has a certain slot for youth, women, and creative arts. Why creative arts? Each one of us has at some point or the other watched a Bollywood movie, Nollywood movie, etc. They require funding, but they don't require funding the traditional way. We have identified as Afreximbank ways in which the creative arts can be assisted. They tend to be small, they tend to be driven by one individual, and the creative arts are a very important and critical part of the business community in Africa, and they require funding. So please check information available on Afreximbank website on CANEX, which is what we call the Creative Arts Nexus. And we encourage the Ministry of Trade working with the various creative arts sector so that we can see how they can be facilitated in order to access some kind of funding or support, at least just to make them professional enough to a level where they can monetize some of their works so that they can start gaining cash and
from there.
Funding from their activities.
All right.
That's all I can say, but I must mention that it's been a little tough for banks, and let's hope that there will be some reprieve at some point. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Kudakwashi. Let's go to Mr. Francis Ogwang. A few comments that came through, but also in just about at least 2 minutes to be able to wind up.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Mildred. Again, thanks to the Ministry of Trade for organizing this forum. I will talk to, just a few specific things. The cost of doing business in Uganda. I would like to limit my comment to the cost of doing business in as far as financing is concerned, because that is, as a banker, that's where I would have control. Now, we cannot share in this meeting all the possible solutions or options that would be available towards reducing the cost of financing. But I would like to say that outside here, there are many that can be discussed. For example, the export credit agency arrangement, where if you're going to be importing equipment or machinery, industrial machinery from, let's say, Europe or Asia or wherever it is, a lot of those countries have export credit agency arrangements. So again, we can find a way of working with those agencies so that we're able to land the machinery here cheaper. I want to make it a little bit more specific, that if you're going to be importing textiles equipment from India, there is the Exim Bank of India, who would be able to price their loan to EADB, let's say, at 3%. So if we then ultimately price it to you at 6%, net-net, you'll have obtained financing at a very low price. But as I said, we cannot discuss all the solutions here. The issue of the cashew nuts, I think, like my colleague Kudakwashi mentioned, I think what's important is scale. If we're going to have 1 acre of cashew nut here and then another acre of cashew nut the other side, we're not going to be able to supply to the African market. Cashew is a big crop in Tanzania. We know that the cashew nut plantations are guarded with security, but that is because there is scale. So I think the appeal that I'm making to the members here this afternoon is that if we are going to do anything meaningful to take advantage of this initiative, then we need to be able to scale up. Somebody talked about, and I think this was a suggestion, that are we able to directly do the technical assistance programs that the bank runs, for purposes of upskilling or providing knowledge, to the various business groups, rather than working through commercial banks? Yes, I think I've taken note of this. I think this is a very, very important one. For example, the Uganda Women Entrepreneurs Association, and I'm sure Chamber of Commerce, and Small Scale Industry, and I'm sure the Private Sector Foundation. I think all these bodies are very, very, very knowledgeable, reservoirs of knowledge in the various areas of business that they represent. So yes, I think that's an aspect that we can be able to pick up as we plan our various training programs.
Okay.
Somebody talked about the volatility of the Ugandan currency. And I just want to say that Uganda operates a liberalized foreign exchange market, basically driven by supply and demand. So essentially, no single institution can claim to have overall control over how the currency performs. I think for us, and for the benefit of the members of the private sector here, is to see what instruments are available in the market to ensure that you cushion yourself or you vaccinate yourself from against the negative effects of the currency volatility, you know? And again, what I would like to say is that there will be several, depending on what your requirements, what your plans are like. Because the issue of currency volatility, I mean, it's a demand and supply market. That is what we operate in Uganda.
Okay.
But I would like to say, my parting shot is that my advice would be that for purposes of credit, that you match your currency of borrowing to the currency of your cash inflows. I would advise against a business that generates Uganda shilling cash flow borrowing in hard currency. It is okay for somebody who earns dollars to borrow in shillings. I mean, that makes sense because ultimately, net, you're the winner. But I would advise against somebody who earns in shillings borrowing in dollars because you do not have the control over the price of the hard currency. Thank you. Thank you, Mildred.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Gwanga. Mr. Alinda Hez, I'll give you the last 2 minutes to just respond briefly to a few of the discussions and give us your parting shots.
Thank you, Mildred. I think there was a question or a concern about inclusive participation, Robert Chigongo, in the AfCFTA. Government will continue and even expand on the operations of free zones. We are actually transiting to special economic zones. Now, these facilities will continue to incentivize exporters and producers. And as that happens, as the volumes grow, there will be what I want to term a suction effect to the upstream on the farm. And that runs through the midstream, the logistics, the transportation into the free zones and for onward exportation. And when we do that, then the resources are being transferred from the international markets, backward linkage demand, going to the farm, going to the local producers, and all the way through the logistics supply chain down to the exporter and to the international market. So once we expand on these operations, definitely everybody who participates in terms of production, who is economically active, should be able to benefit. And of course, when we go to the markets, I think the Ministry of Trade and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and free zones and others, we need to have this whole of government approach. We need to sit together and operationalize this concept of commercial diplomacy. What are our embassies doing in those countries? Can we also have a KPI, a key performance indicator, to do with trade numbers, trade volumes, that could be reported back to the capital at the end of a period, so that we know, yes, we are finding market, yes, information is being relayed to the home country for production to meet the demands of that market. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Alinda Eskimomi. A round of applause for our panel. That was brilliant. It was emotive a bit. There was tight questions coming through, but we're speaking to realities if we are to be able to take up from the opportunities of the African Continental Free Trade Area. So to our panel, I will allow you, please, take back your seats in the audience as we get to listen to a very short and brief, explanatory speech that will be coming in from Joy Kategekwa, presentation at that. And Joy Kategekwa is our regional strategic advisor on the African Continental Free Trade Area and also UNDP Regional Bureau Africa. So if Joy is ready, I'm kindly requesting that we get her through She wasn't able to
Yes,
get to
indeed.
us physically. Joy, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Mildred, and good morning from New York again. I've been given 5 minutes to share reflections on really how to position, and I'd like to make 5 points. 1 around the opportunity, 2nd around readiness, 3rd around networks, 4th around infrastructure, and 5th around enforcement. In order to maximize the opportunity in the AFCFTA, we have to understand it. And so there's a process for the private sector that needs to dig deep into the detail to understand what is the 90% we currently have and how do we utilize that. Because you see, if we position for the 7 and the 3 that are to come in the future, we miss the boat for now. I saw Mr. Ogwang had a fascinating report in his hands, the AFCFTA Futures Report, Making It Work for Women and Youth. UNDP produces this report jointly with the AFCFTA Secretariat, and we will be launching the 2nd edition of that report at the Intra-African Trade Fair in Durban a week from now. And in that report, the 2nd edition, we're going to be talking precisely about which value chains for a Made in Africa revolution. When I was with you the day before yesterday, I tried to give a snippet into what is coming on that. But I think we can commit as UNDP to ensuring that this report is circulated to the private sector. I'd also like to propose for the resident representatives' consideration that we start to have AFCFTA clinics for the private sector, where we break down what these value chains are concretely, so that they can understand what the opportunity is and therefore better position. The 2nd point is around readiness. What if you know the opportunity? What will you do about it? You prepare to export. And so what is the question of readiness? And there I'd like to really reiterate the points around scale. Someone mentioned the question around scale, producing quality, producing at the standards and the norms in the AFCFTA. This means that there has to be a new marriage between those providers of capacity building on the one hand and the private sector. That it is not enough to tell us about the opportunity. We have to invest in understanding what are the practical challenges that companies are facing. Where is the need for scale? Where is the need for specific intervention of a capacity building nature? So we move away from the theory and get into the practice. Therefore, again, for the consideration of those who do capacity building in the room, certainly for my colleague Elsie as well, how can we create a specific capacity building program that is determined in scope by the voices that have come out of the floor today? The 3rd point is around networks. On Sunday, I will go to Durban, where the Intra-African Trade Fair is taking place. And there it's about showcase. Who are the Ugandans going to be there? When we talk about 15% as intra-African trade, obviously it's an underestimation because we only talk about what we capture formally. But that 15% should tell us something is happening. We must tell the story. We must preach it. We must showcase it. We spoke about Accra before, and the pride I felt seeing Made in Uganda shoes. I bought them, not because I'm Ugandan, but because also they were of quality. And therefore, we must be out there and showcase these products. How do we network? How are our voices out there? The 4th point is around the question of infrastructure. And, you know, the whole 3 days have really been about the infrastructure of trade, things around energy, transport, digital, communication, logistics, and this morning's panel, financial. But what is the role of the private sector in those solutions? You know, we talk about the government must create the infrastructure. How do we entice the government to get models that make private sector run, Ugandan private sector, run fast to accelerate the delivery of these solutions? So the infrastructure of trade. Finally, the 5th point is around enforcement. Yesterday, there were questions around, oh, they're going to come and drown us out. Oh, but we're SMEs. Oh, but ESC has failed. Shall we make it? Of course we shall make it. We shall make it. But the question is, how do we prepare for it? And this is where I think the government, the Ministry of Trade has a critical role to play, because it's about the question of enforcement of the agreement. Trade agreements are structured around rights and obligations. You have, in a sense, an obligation to meet certain things. So the products that are going to be coming to the AFCFTA market have to be made in a state party. So we cannot export in the AFCFTA market this phone and say, oh, but it's made in Uganda, because where we're taking it, they will have a scrupulous, detailed assessment of whether the rules of origin are in fact in sync, that it is made in Uganda. So Uganda can do the same so that we avoid transshipment. Are these products coming into the Ugandan market really made in a state party of the AFCFTA? We can also use the sequencing approach to create some peace and room to breathe as we enter the market. Because remember, we're talking about 90%. So that is a key. But then there is the 7%. If the pain points are really captured in that 7%, it gives time to breathe as you go into there. And of course, those that are totally out, totally difficult, totally complex, can be put in the 3%. But we must remember also that what you do, others can do. So if Uganda took the approach to say, well, we're going to protect our own, well, Senegal will protect their own. Well, Togo will protect their own. South Africa will protect their own. And therefore, it becomes a losing game for everybody. So let us have peace and assurance in the fact that we're building on the acquis. Remember, ESC goes up to around 97% of tariff lines liberalized. So if the AFCFTA is at 90, surely we're not in a new regime, legally, technically. So we have room to understand, to breathe, and know that we're building on something that is already in establishment. Final point is around trade defense instruments. That if things go wrong and the market is flooded, there are instruments within the agreement, the AFCFTA goods agreement, that allow you to investigate, to assess that indeed this is dumping, and to therefore countervail. And our officials at the Trade Ministry are seasoned in understanding what these rules mean. I saw you were with Mr. Mutahunga yesterday. These people know, understand the detail, have practiced it for a long time. And so how do we strengthen our capacity within the ministries, within the institutions, to use those trade defense instruments to ensure that what happens in the AFCFTA is really a dispensation of AFCFTA trade made in Africa? In closing, I'd like to say there are two big pillars that stay with me. If government said our mind is on implementation, i.e., we shall focus on creating the environment to create a regime that gives the preferential access that we have promised, but that also creates the enabling environment for exporters to prepare to go and utilize that which others have promised, that is huge and that is solid. Then the private sector can focus on utilization. And utilization is ultimately about how do we get the products up. So educate us. Put us to account. Tell us what it is that you need concretely, especially on this second side, which is the utilization side, so that the capacity building programs can be shaped in a manner that's responsive to get the footprint up of Made in Uganda for the AFCFTA. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much, Joy. That was really, really brilliant. I can't wrap up anymore. I can't add anything to what Joy has said to us. And just before we get to wrap up the day's event, of course, we'll be having our closing remarks in just a bit. Allow me get the microphone back to my colleague, Mr. Morris Mugisha. Morris, over to you.
We can do better than that for Mildred. A round of applause for Mildred. As always, a great conversation. Mildred, thank you so much. It's difficult when you have a great panel of eminent persons and then you have to manage TV time. And so I want to applaud you for managing this panel, but also being able to manage the time. We have a few more minutes to go, and so we want to wrap up. I'll not dig into the conversation Mildred has already had, so allow me quickly ask our Commissioner, External Trade, Emmanuel Mutahunga, to come and run us through some of the key technical outputs for us from this 3-day conversation. And then we will invite Elsie to wrap up the bit of the conversation on behalf of our development partners and our co-convener, UNDP. And then we'll ask the minister to talk to us. I think that works for us. Okay, Mutahunga? He told me he would do 2 minutes, so I am not going very far. I'll stay near, just close by.
So Morris has given me a very hard task of summarizing what has been talked about in 10.5 hours and do it in 2 minutes. Therefore, I will skip protocol and move straight to that. And I believe that I'll be able to deliver. The first thing that I want to really point out is that we have agreed over the 3 days or 3 afternoons that the African Continental Free Trade Area provides us a market opportunity. On the first day, we saw the glimpses on the various of the market gaps that we have in the presentation of the PS, which was very clear with those highlights. You have a market of 20 billion, you only have 1%. So we agreed in principle that the Continental Free Trade Area provides us that market opportunity. Two, we must work together, government, public sector, to harness those opportunities. And we have listed all those aspects that we think we need to do. And I must say, I'm happy I didn't hear so much of government should help us to do this, because we must identify what we need to do together. Broadly, we talked about increasing production, because production must be increased to match what the market requires. If I may put it this way, we must remove peas and trade from international trade. Say that I produce, consume part of this, what remains, I look for a market for it. No. Peas and international trade, we remove it, we look at the market size, produce to get to that market. Or even the thinking that I produce what I eat, that's what I must sell. Some of these countries, when you get there, they produce what is required in the market, even if they don't eat it. And we really need to move there. I saw that coming out. The other key aspect, besides the increasing production and all the things that come with it, competitiveness in production. Quality, we talked about infrastructure, and that is clearly coming out. Don't worry about the 2 minutes. I want to reassure all of us that we have a team here that has been capturing all the discussions over the period that we've had, and we'll be able to put them to good use and produce a good report. But another element that I need to bring out is the rationalization of policies. Because we talked so much about trade policy, but if you note, if you have a market of 2 billion and you are selling there only 20, the problem is not the market. The problem is somewhere else. So, rationalization of policies of government so that the policies are complementary to each other clearly came out. And we just had in the discussion now about tax policies, for example, so that you are pursuing that unified long-term objective. Financing has come out, the ease of trading with each other. That's how I term it. We have also clearly captured that when we talked about the payment settlement systems clearly coming out. I think that's very essential so that you don't move with your Ugandan shillings. You go to Algeria and they say, what pieces of paper are these? Very essential. And I think we really have to pick those. Then the two principles that I talked about, we have a market and we must work together as a government, private sector to get them. From this discussion we've just had, it's really very clear that we must engage together with the financing institutions to find a solution. I did not hear the bank saying that it's not a problem of the interest rate. They are only telling us we have to deal with the risk. Maybe we need to have a conversation on what are the sources of the risks for the financial institutions, deal with those so that the cost of financing can come down. I think it's essential. It is particularly very essential. Now, just that as a highlight, I want to give a glimpse on what we intend to do with this. All these have been captured, like I just alluded to, and they inform the drafting of a national implementation strategy where we'll be undertaking further consultations, including at sector level. We already agreed with some private sector associations. We'll do that so that what we come up with is a robust document. And please, the time to engage in consultations is about now, because we would want that when we finish this, we start implementation. We don't do implementation as we debate this and that. Honorable Minister and my peers, I wanted to request that you allow that the team that has negotiated what we have discussed here for 3 days, and we still haven't completed, at least stands up for recognition. I have a few in the room, a few of them still in here. I thank you very much. These people and the others that are there do a great job. We sift through all these product tariff lines, the 5,000 something you talked about. We look at the tariff lines, we look at the rules of origin, you look at this and that. And probably at the next engagement, I'll be asking that they should be considered for payment as scientists. I thank you.
Commissioner, you have started a conversation that might keep us here this evening. But I have learned that when you say something or text a message to somebody, and they don't have an immediate reply for you, or they really don't think it is very priority, they say noted. And the PS I had her say noted. So I am not so sure where it lies, but that's a conversation for another day. Allow me begin our welcome remarks by requesting Elsie Atafa, the country representative UNDP, to come on behalf of the UN family, wrap this conversation, the 3-day conversation. Round of applause, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Maurice. In the interest of time, I would be quite brief. I'm reading the statement on behalf of the United Nations Resident Coordinator, Madam Susan Ngongi Namondo, and to show that this is a collective effort, whilst we are partnering as UNDP with the ministry, it's a collective effort. The Minister of State for Trade and Industry and Cooperatives, Honorable Bahati, Honorable Amelia Chambade, it's good to see you here. The PS, Geraldine Sally, and let me say all protocols observed because of time. Good afternoon or good evening to you all. I'm delighted to have participated in this historic dialogue on the African Continental Free Trade Area, which has been going on for the last 3 days. I congratulate the government of Uganda, in particular the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Cooperatives, for organizing the conversation in collaboration with UNDP. The discussion has attracted active participation of all key stakeholders in the trade agenda, including government and non-government actors. The theme of this national dialogue, Unlocking the Potential of the African Continental Free Trade Area in Uganda, calls on us all to join efforts towards enabling Uganda to harness the benefits presented by the world's largest free trade area with 54 participating countries. The UN system has been at the forefront and will continue to collaborate with government in its national development aspirations, including the promotion of sustainable and inclusive industrialization and trade for socio-economic transformation. Honorable Ministers, distinguished participants, as I conclude, allow me to emphasize a few areas that will need to be focused on as we promote Uganda's readiness for the African Continental Free Trade Area in the short and medium terms. First, articulating a national implementation strategy for AFCTA based on analytical evidence, national stakeholder consultation, and lessons from other countries that already have these strategies in place. My office is committed to rallying the necessary technical expertise and financial resources from the United Nations system to support this cause, but efforts should be made nationally, driven by the ministry. 2, building a strong and resilient private sector, because there is evidence that investment in production of goods and services can effectively be led by the private sector if government creates an enabling environment for them to thrive. 3, regulatory and policy reforms will also be key to the alignment and national realization of the benefits of the Protocol on Trade in Goods and Trade in Services. The reform should aim at facilitating local production capacity, easing the movement of goods, services, and factors of production, as well as reduction of the tariff and non-tariff barriers to continental trade. 4th, enhancing the role of Ugandan women and youth in the AFCTA implementation by addressing the peculiar obstacles they face in trade. Important among these is addressing difficulties faced by women in cross-border trading and supporting the technological and financing needs of young entrepreneurs. Honorable Ministers, distinguished guests, I congratulate the government of Uganda for having partnered with the United Nations family to initiate strategic actions towards a national AFCTA implementation journey. Appreciation also goes to all the participants for the open and candid deliberations during this three-day dialogue. It is my hope that the outcomes of this conversation will inform the next course of action. It is therefore my privilege once again that the United Nations family, and in particular the UNDP, has supported this journey, and we look forward to taking it forward with you. Thank you very much.
Another round of applause for our co-convener, the UNDP and the UN family. We want to thank you, Elsie. Honorable Minister, when you were not here yesterday, we gave Elsie the microphone for only about 2 minutes, but the storm she brewed on this microphone can only be defined by Mildred. But the passion with which she speaks to the African Continental Free Trade Area and the opportunities therein for our fantastic goods and services is on another level. And we want to thank you, Elsie, for your passion in driving this conversation. Thank you so much. Now that said, I don't have the capacity to invite the minister, so I'll ask the PS to come and invite the minister to speak to us. You're most welcome, PS.
Thank you very much, Maurice Mugisha, for that. Thank you very much, our resident representative, for that passionate speech and passionate closure and summary of where we intend to go. And I would also like to thank the former Minister, Honorable Amelia Chambade, again for the passion. You people, do you feel the passion in the room? Because that passion must be escorted by actions. Sincerely, if we leave this room and nothing happens, we'll be very disappointed with ourselves. So I think we have a lot of work to do. Everything of ours is cut out, and we really need to just get our gears on and wrap up our sleeves and start getting to some serious work. Without further ado, because I know that people had lunch some hours ago, it's now almost dinner time. I would like to invite my Honorable Minister, who actually comes in the capacity of both Speaker, because he's been here in two capacities. He's represented the Speaker of Parliament, Honorable Jacob Olanya, and then he's also represented my minister at the ministerial level, but in his substantive capacity, he's the Honorable Minister of State for Industries, Honorable David Bahati. Please welcome.
Thank you very much, PS, the country rep UNDP. We really want to thank you for the passion and the support you have given us to have this dialogue take place. I think she deserves another hand clap. I want to thank each one of you for participating in this important dialogue. The private sector and other government officials who managed to spare time for the last 3 days to come and discuss the future of Africa. So we want to clap for you on behalf of the ministry. I also want particularly again join the PS and others in thanking the Senior Presidential Advisor on Industry, the Honorable Amelia Chambade, who was also the chief negotiator on most of these agreements for us. She did a very, very, very wonderful job. But Amelia, as you know, everything good in this agreement is the president, and everything bad that we'll find along the way will be attributed to you. That's how government works. That's how government works. So my job was really to thank you for coming. And on Wednesday, when I was opening this dialogue, I did state that we had 3 objectives. I hope we have been able to fulfill these objectives. The first objective was to understand the African Continental Free Trade Area. I hope after this conversation you understand it. What is in there for you? What was the motivation for us on behalf of government to really work hard to make sure that this agreement is in place? The second was to position ourselves to take advantage of this agreement. And the third was to look at the role of the private sector and also again emphasize the role of the government, which is to improve the environment. I just wanted to put a slide here because everybody must also understand the context within which the government, especially President Yoweri Museveni, that we have been operating to make sure that the African continent continues to work together to make sure that we get out of the situation we are in. And I want to remind the participants, if you can, where has the slide gone? One of the motivations in coming up with this agreement was really try as much as possible to attack and fight the bottlenecks that continue to make Africa lag behind. The first one, according to His Excellency President Yoweri Museveni, which all of us must continue to know, is ideological disorientation. Understanding the philosophy of your country, the philosophy of the continent, what we are up to. For example, in the private sector, there are those who are stuck in their towns, in their countries, but we are telling you today that we have a population of 1.2 billion on the continent, and that is your market. We have a GDP of 3 trillion. That is what we are talking about. So whatever you are producing, don't produce in a very limited. Change your mindset. Change the orientation to focus on the continent. The second is what I talked about, the weak state, especially the army and all that. And I made a point on Wednesday that I think at the heads of government and state, we need really to work hard to ensure that the coups that are coming up again on the African continent, we need to remind them. And I also said that actually you can work as a private sector to help us stabilize the security situation on the continent. Because when businessmen and women are trading, people will not have time to fight. When you are making money, you will not have time to fight. And the third was the